Hello again, friends! And you are our friends, and welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru right here in the second half of summer. The sun won't be setting after 8 p.m. anymore. We're beginning to get ready for the fall. We'll see how far we fall this week here on the show. I'm your host, the great Brian Last, and of course, the man who will be answering questions and doing who knows what, saying who knows what, about who knows who, Mr. Jim Cornette.
Who do the voodoo that you do so well? What are you babbling about today? And also, where are you living? Where are you? Are you in a cave? The sun goes down. Sun goes down on a sleepy. The sun goes down at 8 o'clock where you're at?
What sunset where you live?
About 9 o'clock.
Really?
Wow. It was after 9, but we just hit the tipping point where it's right before 9 o'clock. For the rest of the year now. It's obviously not going to go back in the other direction until next year. That would be odd if that happened. But it's that early out there.
Yeah, we just had I think it was like 3 days ago, we had our last sunset after 8 p.m. until next year.
Did you have a party?
No. It's a sad occasion. It's not an occasion to celebrate.
Well, there's going away parties. You sometimes have parties for sad occasions.
How can I miss you if you never go away to
How can we miss you if you don't go away? See? Well, there you go. See you later, son. Sun goes down and asleep. But I guess that's right anyway, because in New Jersey, most of the people up there look better in the dark. So the more dark you get, the happier the people are. What time does it get light up there?
Yeah, I don't think that's why it happens. I don't think it's a thing like, how do we fix Jersey? I know, more darkness. I don't think that's what it is.
Well, that would be a boon if it happened naturally. What time does it get daylight? Are you up that early in the morning?
Not recently, but it's still before 6 a.m.
Oh, well, now that's way too early.
What time do you get daylight?
Well, we don't get daylight that fucking early.
What time do you get it?
That's just ridiculously early. It's around about... Well, it depends. Now, you can start seeing things at, 6:30-ish or a few minutes thereabouts. But it really pops out around about 7. So I guess we're just making up for what we lose at one end, we make up for the other. What have you lost at the other end recently, Brian?
At the other end of what?
I don't know. That's what it was your topic. You were talking about it.
You got me researching right now just to make sure. Sunrise is actually 6:10 right now. 6:10 a.m. and sunset is 7:56 p.m.
Well, I'll just extrapolate, exaggerate, or estimate on mine because I'm not going to go through the time and trouble to look at it. It's about what I said it was. Because I get up early in the morning.
You're up before the sunrises, correct?
Well, not all the time. Sometimes I am because I'm old and I have to pee, but often I'm up very early. I'm up before Harley, and Harley's up before Stacy.
Is it wrong that I picture like a living Travis Heckel cartoon, like you in your pajamas walking downstairs and whistling while the sun comes up? And
you will never see me in pajamas.
In a Travis Heckel artwork, I will.
Well, unless we want to age restrict it for YouTube or whatever, I guess you would. Although, I don't know what that would look like anyway.
Well,
but I have been getting some work done, I'll have you know. I've been getting some work done here in the office. I've told everybody that we've got renovations going on here at the house, and things are just torn up in every room, from the stuff that we took out of the rooms that are being renovated and remodeled to put it in the other rooms temporarily. And I've been for months and months trying to clean up the office. And now the pressure's on me. I got a TV crew coming in just a week. I'm not going to divulge exactly who they will represent.
Inside edition.
Well, no, we're staying outside with that edition. It's going to be a new home and garden show, outside edition. But that's not it. No. But I'll leave that up in the air. You will see it sooner or later. It's going to be a fine project. But so I've got to get the office cleaned up. So I've been going through more of the files, trying to stuff back in and trying to organize things. And I have I've got gold from the mines today, Brian. I've been a miner for a memo of gold. And I've got some more gold to the people, the cult of Cornette liked when we talked about paperwork from my files last time, or the last few times. So I've got some more of that stuff today.
Are you looking for anything specific, or are you just going through stuff to see what you can find?
No, well, here's the problem is I don't know or remember what is in. I've narrowed it down now. But see, through years and years and numbers of times of trying to sort things out and moves and things being boxed and unboxed, there are tons of papers that are just, I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 12 built-in file cabinets in this wall unit that are about 3 feet deep apiece. And every single one of them have been jammed full, and there's been no order to most of it. And now I have order to about 8 out of 12 of those drawers. So I'm making progress, but I'm coordinating Smoky Mountain Wrestling over here, Ohio Valley Wrestling over here, Ring of Honor over here, WCW over here, WWF over there, miscellaneous documents and paperwork, business stuff over here, personal stuff over there. It's quite a goddamn process.
What about the VWA? All that paperwork from Lehigh.
Well, there's a very small folder in drawer number 6 marked Virginia Wrestling Association. But Dave Lehigh was a nice fellow. Always presented a fine quality show on the budget that he had.
Wasn't that a version of the New Midnight Express for at least Virginia? Stan Lane and the Southern Gentleman, Jeff Collette?
Yes, for Richmond is what it was. It was just the Richmond city limits was the New Midnight Express. No, it was a local guy that Dave was using named Jeff Collette. And, you know, he said, could Stan come in and team with him and could I manage him? Because he was trying to get his promotion a little more notoriety and get, you know, his top guys in the mix with people that have been on television. And we did that a few times. And everybody was very, very polite back in those days on independent shows. They hadn't figured out that they were the smartest people in the wrestling business at that point, and they didn't have to break multiple, foreign objects, multiple pieces of furniture and razor blades and goddamn barbed wire and broken light tubes and the whole 9 yards. It was just a wrestling show in a smaller building. Imagine that.
And then you'd see all that stuff when you went to work for Goodhart.
Oh, good Lord. But, you know, I think we were on the last show he ever did. And it wasn't a contributory factor, ladies and gentlemen. But me and Stan, we were on 2 or 3 shows in a row there. And he was drawing the biggest independent crowds in the business at the time. There wasn't that many independents to begin with in 1991. But he was doing, 1,500 or 2,000 people in that building in Philly and doing a gate of $30-something, $40-something $1,000. And this is 30 years ago. And goddamn ended up going out of business and leaving town. And I said, how the fuck? That's what me and Stan were at. How the fuck do you go out of business and get run out of town while you're selling out? If that was the case, what was his business plan? If I could only get this thing big enough that I could sell out the Spectrum, I might make some money. But boy, what a cast of characters in the locker room. I'll tell you that.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons he didn't have money was what a cast of characters, how many of them were fly-ins. Everyone was flown in other than those local guys.
Yeah, he bought like 20 plane tickets and he was given the, and I'm sure the Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher did not come up that time and reprise their epic feud at their advanced ages for $500 a piece or whatever. So he was paying some money, but hey, he got to be a promoter and he got to have all the guys that he looked up to and was a fan of work for him. And all that happened was he ended up losing his real business in town and getting run out of town on a rail, owing people money and disappearing for 10 years. So he got out easy. Wait till they find out what's going to happen to Tony Khan in the end.
Oh, come on. Oh, will you leave him out of it? How did you pull him into this discussion?
Well, I'm just saying, people that get into the wrestling business to be promoters that have that mindset, I'm going to book all my favorite wrestlers and they're all going to be such good friends of mine. But anyway, speaking of good friends, I've got a bunch of good friends out there in the cult of Cornette, Brian. And I've got some very special good news to impart to them here today on the program. I've teased this, I've mentioned this, and now's the time to come through with it. Wait a minute, hold on. Ladies and gentlemen, I will have you know that the slow boat from China is about to dock again. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you what, I think we're getting headwinds. We're not only getting headwinds, but cross currents on these boats now. But the boat is about to dock again. New Jim Cornette action figures just in time for Christmas at the rate that we get them out. And for the new listeners, they may be thinking, what in the hell is he talking about? Over the last 4 or 5 years since we've been doing the action figures, right? I used to give the update on the boat. Well, the boat docked, but they won't let anything off of it yet, etc. And we've had to roll back our dates a couple of times, but we've polished this procedure. We've got it down to a fine science now. And I'll have you know that a major red letter day is coming up anyway, Brian, next month, Saturday, September 17th. It's a national holiday. The day that I was inflicted upon the world, the day that I escaped the womb, the day, the red letter day that Jim Cornette was born, September 17th, is also going to be the on sale date for the brand new, never before seen Jim Cornette official new variant action figures. Now, how about that for synergy there? My birthday, and everybody's always wondering, what can I get Jim Cornette for his birthday? What do you get a man who has everything besides a box to keep it in? You've heard him say that, Brian. You've heard him say many times, what can we get Jim for his birthday?
I always tell everyone a cake. Get him a cake.
A cake is a safe bet every time, but in this case, I've answered the question for the general public. What can you get Jim Cornette for his birthday? You can get yourself one of his action figures. And then everybody gets something. See how that works? No, it's perfect.
I see how that works. I see exactly how that works.
But it's perfect. Who else has ever thought of this? Now, because, you know, the bad thing about getting people birthday presents is you spend money on something, you give it to somebody else, and what do you got in your hand? You got bupkis, you got dick, you got nothing. You got standing there with your Peter in your hand. But this way, you can give me a birthday present, you get a goddamn signed, autographed action figure out of the deal. This is flawless. I'm telling you, I'm surprised somebody else hadn't thought of this before. But here's what's going on. You know, the last time back in, what was it? The first week of April, how can I forget? That we offered the action figures. We had the bloody variant, the great moment in my career where Paul Lee whacked me over the head with that prehistoric cell phone, and I nearly bled out on Atlanta TV. Much to Dusty's consternation, I said, get a little juice, kid. Well, those sold, we got 1,200 of them, and they sold out in 36 hours, except for the few that we saved for Australia and New Zealand, and boom, and they sold out in a couple of hours. So, apparently, the Cult of Cornette members, you would gather from this, like figures that represent great moments in my life and my career, right? So, we've done it again. And this time, we're going to have almost 1,500 of these bad boys. Again, I'm saving a couple of boxes back for losses in the mail. Guess what famous event that we are recreating with this brand new action figure, oh great Brian Last?
Oh, geez. Pajamas in the kitchen.
What? You're just dying to see me in pajamas, right?
Okay. It's not that.
Hold on. I'm going to get a UPS box this week, and it's going to be a pair of pajamas.
Is it? Jeez, I don't know what you were wearing when you yelled at the people about the fence.
All right. I'm just going to... No, we're not doing an action figure of what I wear when I'm out yelling at people in my yard. Actually, that may be popular now that I've said it out loud. But anyway, I'll get to the meat of the matter. What do people retweet the clip of and the pictures of and comment on that I've ever done in my life so much, often to this day, repeatedly? My debut on Monday Night Raw when I was welcomed and greeted and even hugged by Bobby the Brain Heenan. The pink and red suit where I was welcomed into the fold by none other than my childhood hero, the greatest manager of all time. And that is the great moment that we are recreating in this new action figure that comes complete, by the way, with glasses, microphone, and matching tennis racket.
Plus a button to press on the back that leaks out sweat, if you remember that night.
Boy, I'll tell you what, that goddamn tin tool shed, what was it, Alexandria Bay, New York? It was like being in a camp stove. And there's some rec center up there. Somebody tweeted pictures when we talked about it on one of the shows. They tweeted pictures. The place is still there, and I think they have kids' sports in it or whatever. But that was in the early days of Monday Night Raw. It was roasting, but yes. So the pink and red suit, brand new design from Figures Toy Company, the WWF Monday Night Raw 1993 debut suit. If you've got a Bobby Heenan figure, then you're all set. If not, we can't sell Bobby's figures, but I'm sure you can find one. And they come complete, as I said, glasses, microphone, and tennis racket. We will have a little under 1,500 of them. And I know some people are going to say, Jim, you have this trouble. Why don't you just get 5,000 of these bastards? Again, I remind you, I'll send you out on this errand. You go get 5,000 of these things made, hand-painted, and put on a boat from China and see how long it takes you and how easy it is. And get back to me. So act quickly on September 17th, noon Eastern at JimCornette.com. That's when they go on sale. And there will be pictures at JimCornette.com on the homepage of banners, so you'll see what they look like on September the 1st. So you got plenty of advance notice. And that's not all, Brian, because you know what's coming up. You're aware that the end of the year is coming quickly. It happens every year.
I am aware of this. Apparently, the sun is setting even earlier now,
well,
leading towards the end of the year, which will be the earliest sunset of the year.
The end of the year is the holiday season. That's Christmas. That's Hanukkah. That's Kwanzaa. That's a gift-giving season as well. Not only birthdays are gift-giving occasions, but also the holidays. And guess what we got, ladies and gentlemen? Just in time for Christmas, Santa Corny. Because a lot of you know, we did a Christmas variant, and I actually wasn't happy with it. It bugged me. Nobody else cared, but they forgot to instructify the factory to paint my handkerchief. So my handkerchief was the same color as my jacket on the first variant of the Christmas variant. And that's been bugging me ever since. So we have redesigned the Christmas variant just in time for Christmas 2022. I'm still in the festive red and green suit, but we've reversed the colors. Now it's a red jacket and green pants instead of vice versa. And this racket, since I've got popular enough that I get my own tennis racket and custom-made glasses, this figure comes with microphone, glasses, tennis racket, and I'm wearing a Santa hat, Brian. I'm wearing a Santa hat in the figure. I've never looked so festive. It's almost like I'm not Ebenezer Scrooge, and I'm not trying to fucking evict Tiny Tim.
I know, how come you're against the fantasy booking of Jim Cornette in the kitchen with pajamas, but the idea of festive Jim Cornette loving the people with his Santa Claus outfit doesn't bother you?
Because since I've lost weight and trimmed down, I can get down the chimney. So now I can break into everybody's home and steal all of their Christmas presents the night before Christmas, while all the Who's are sleeping. Anyway, let Santa Corny come down your chimney this season. Again, they go on sale Saturday, September 17th. It's limited to a little less than 1,500. It's noon Eastern time at JimCornette.com. And you can see pictures of this fine Christmas variant with a painted handkerchief this time at JimCornette.com starting on September the 1st. So again, Jim Cornette comes through with the festive holiday season for everybody. And on the Santa variants, obviously, if you want to send somebody a greeting of Christmas cheer, I can do that. Or if you want to send somebody some bah humbug wishes, I can do that too. It's all up to you. It's up to the people.
If this sells well next year, can we get one with you with a yarmulke and a menorah for my people?
Well, yeah, but now we
kosher corny.
Is there a kosher corny? Do I have to be, what is the procedure? Do I have to undergo some kind of surgical alteration to be kosher, or is that something else I'm thinking of?
Well, I don't know. Paul Bosch was the Jewish heavyweight champion, and he didn't have that surgery. But I think if we get a rabbi to bless the figure, we're okay.
Well, in that case, everybody should bless my figures. But remember, Saturday, September 17th, now you know what to get me for my birthday, and you get a free action figure out of it. And for Christmas, for you or your loved ones, Santa Corny can bring the good cheer. That's why I've been trying to get some room around here to bring in the new merchandise, the new items. But it's your television program.
Well, it's good to know that we're now televised.
It's your television. It's your program.
That it is.
I was looking at this format, and I saw the word television right at the same time. All right. You lead from here.
Well, you brought up formats, and let's get to whatever you have on your agenda first. Let me first ask you, did you watch anything that we need to talk about here today?
Well,
SmackDown,
actually,
Raw, Rampage,
well, hold on now. We've done a program since some of that. On the experience that we just did a few days ago, we talked about the Rampage and the fact that SmackDown was preempted in my market, apparently with many others. It got bumped a lot for whatever ball game was going on. And I've checked on the Cock, and they're a month behind on SmackDown programs. Did you know that? The last SmackDown episode they've got up on Peacock is from the middle of July.
I knew there was some sort of lag, but more than likely it's available on your on-demand service.
Well, isn't that on demand?
Well,
I'm demanding that the Peacock show me the goddamn SmackDown. And
No, I meant like your television itself has like on-demand for NBC, not what's archived after 30 days.
It's not on NBC. It's on Fox.
Excuse me, on Fox. Well, then there should be a Fox on demand feature with your cable.
Well, why didn't you tell me that before? Maybe I could have seen it.
I thought you knew.
I don't look at all that on demand shit. Just pisses me off. It's confusing, and I like the TV guide on the cable, and I just either tape shit or watch shit as it happens. I don't get into all that streaming shit. It gets complicated. I'll track it down. Anyway, I did watch the Rivals episode on Triple H and Mick Foley. We can talk about that today. I was going to watch Biography last night on DX, and they've done a biography on, these individual stars, and it's a biography of their life. Are they going to go into detail on every member of DX, or is it just their professional lives together? I wonder, because the point is, I was going to watch that and I went to sleep soon as it started. So I had recorded that. So we'll get to that on the experience. And were there any other wrestling programs? God damn, I can't think of them. So but I've got stuff to make up for it.
All right.
Ask me about it.
What do you have to make up for this lack of...
Well, I'll tell you what I've got. This is not dated, but it's from 1997, and we can narrow down the season a little bit better. But a couple of weeks ago on one of the programs, we had ideas that our favorite shit stain had come up with for Shotgun Saturday Night Live when that show was debuting, and they were trying to figure out the concept of it and what was going on. Well, I found another 2 pages of notes here that were circulated, and this time it was signed. Ideas regarding talent roster, Vince Russo. So he's taking credit for this one. And every once in a while, and I don't know that this was the names I'm seeing on here are all the people on the talent roster that were kind of floating aimlessly, that were not figured into anything, were not actually doing possibly well in their current incarnations, whatever. The people on the roster that they needed to figure out some way to change, tweak, or do something with, right? So this is not the entire roster. And every once in a while, Vince would ask for ideas on such and such people, or sometimes he'd say the whole roster, or evaluations or whatever. Sometimes JR would asked the same thing. But in this case, it appears that, because I don't remember anybody ever asking for ideas for this list of people. So I think he's taken a bunch of guys, like I said, that were kind of floating and been proactive. Because the one thing that you would get, as we've talked about from this fellow, is a lot of ideas. So I just thought we'd go through some of these. Mark Marrow and Sable. Remember when they were going to, they revamped Marrow about 3 or 4 times, but they switched him heel at one point and tried to give him a new look and a new attitude, right? Because originally he'd come in as a babyface with her at his corner. And as I'd mentioned to Bruce, why the fuck is anybody going to cheer for him when he's got this blonde with big hoo-has in his corner? And what's her purpose for being there? Well, she looks great. Well, what's her purpose? She's not his manager. A valet generally accompanies an obnoxious, egotistical heel. So why is this guy that you want people to take as a babyface, whose only position in the business thus far has been impersonating Little Richard, why do you want her to come out with him, and what are the people supposed to think about it? And all they could do, well, they look great together. That was Bruce's thing. That was Vince's thing. It was never explained what her purpose was. So Mark Marrow and Sable, this idea sheet. I think we should go on as scheduled with Marrow and Sable in regards to his new look and new attitude. Well, that's nice of him to say that, since I don't know at the time that he was officially on the creative team. Here, that's what we got to narrow this time frame down. From there, I believe that Marrow should start abusing Sable out of jealousy.
Oh my God.
Which in turn will turn the fans against him while they cheer for her. That was the problem originally. When he was a babyface, they cheered for her and she turned the fans against him. He was a spare prick at the wedding. He was useless. They were all looking at her. So anyway, he says he should start abusing her, which in turn will turn the fans against him while they cheer for her. At the appropriate time, a top babyface, maybe Dude Love in parentheses, should go to the aid of Sable, who in turn will go with that babyface. Then at the appropriate time, wait a minute, a top babyface should go to the aid of Sable, who in turn will go with that babyface. Then at the appropriate time, Sable will screw the babyface in favor of Marrow. In other words, it was a work orchestrated between Marrow and Sable all along, thus firmly pitting the fans against them.
It's absolutely Vince Russo because it's a swerve.
The swerve.
Yeah.
And actually, he's stealing and didn't even know it. He's stealing the fucking Dirty White Girl and Dirty White Boy and Tom Pritchard angle from Alabama 10 years previously, and he didn't know because he'd never seen that. However, I love it. He says at the appropriate time, a top babyface, maybe Dude. I'm pretty sure this is in one of Cactus's books. But if it's not, or even if it is, there was a time, and it may have been WrestleMania 97, that it would fit. There was a time where the idea was, and maybe it's 98, I can't remember, but the idea was for, and it could have been 98 because Mick was figured in by then, so it had to be 97. The idea was Mick Foley versus Mark Marrow in some respect, right? Following along this idea. And they told me to call Mick and tell him that he'd be on WrestleMania wrestling Mark Marrow in this idea that they had involving Sable. And I called him up and I pitched it to him, and there was silence on the phone. And then he said, Corny, I don't know if anyone's ever asked you this before, but is it okay if I'm just not on WrestleMania?
Wow.
Because he knew it was death. He didn't want to work on WrestleMania with Mark Marrow over Sable. So anyway, they changed it. Number 2 on this idea sheet, Tiger Ali Singh. Remember him? Tiger Singh's son. Another of he was like the Hindu from Ontario version of Carlos Colon's kids in Puerto Rico. He'd always been the hero's son, and he assumed he was, destined for greatness. So actually, old shit stain here, sooner or later, a blind squirrel will find a nut. And I've got to say that sooner or later, I always knew I would agree with something he said. And here it is. Tiger Ali Singh, just let the guy be himself and the fans will genuinely hate him, in capital letters. Doug Furnas and Phil LaFon. Remember one of the great tag teams of the 90s for All Japan Wrestling, but by this point, LaFon's knees were shot, and he was not the guy that he once was. And Doug Furnas was a beast and the world's strongest man and an athletic marvel, but they didn't fit in the WWF at the time like a lot of just good working tag teams didn't.
And I think that's right around the time people started to realize just how beat up the All Japan guys were.
Yeah, because they'd been in All Japan for 10 years. Furnas and LaFon, blanket them in the Japanese flag and have Yokozuna and the Patriot join their cause at the appropriate time.
Yokozuna and the Patriot?
The soldiers of the rising sun. So he's going to turn Del Wilkes the Patriot. This is summer of 97, because Del had just come in by that point. Yokozuna was not let go at that point. I think he may have been in Duke at that point. Number 4, Mark Henry. Let me come back to
Wait, hold on. You're going way too fast past the Sons of the Rising Sun.
Oh, okay. Soldiers of the Rising Sun.
Soldiers of the Rising Sun. So it's Furnas and LaFon draped in Japanese flags with Yokozuna and the Patriot?
Yes.
All right, maybe you didn't go too fast past enough.
Well, yeah. See, Furnas and LaFon, we saw they've done great in Japan. And again, Vince Russo had never seen Doug Furnas before he showed up in the WWF. He hadn't seen him in Continental. He hadn't seen him in All Japan. He hadn't seen him on WCW. He didn't know what the fuck he could do.
So the Patriot would have had
to turn heel and become a Japanese sympathizer.
He would have come out of the Bret Hart feud, upset that America didn't prevail over Canada, and announced that he's renouncing America and he's joined forces with Yokozuna.
Yes, who's Samoan. And number 4, Mark Henry. Let me come back to this one. That's what it says. Let me come back to this one. Number 5, Flash Funk. Remember Too Cold Scorpio, Flash Funk. Easy. Charles Skaggs, and let him be his high-flying self, flying with an apostrophe and no G. Maybe rub him up against Ahmed Johnson in their cause against the nation.
Rub him up against him?
Yeah. Is it a black thing? Yes, that's what it is. Have a conversation with Skaggs and find out for yourself. Let him denounce the gimmick and just do what he does best. Maybe the nation recruits him, maybe they don't. I think they do. He says no, they kick his ass, and perhaps he recruits Ahmed and Mark Henry to help him kick theirs. How about the Posse? Let them be what they are, and that isn't a prejudice statement. No D on the end of prejudice. That's not a prejudice statement.
Wow.
Remember Rick Bogner, the fake razor?
Yeah.
Rick Bogner, cut his hair, put him with Tom Brandi, and you have a beautiful Italian hitmen team. But real Italian gangsters, don't kill them by gimmicking them.
I don't understand. Real Italian gangsters, unlike what, Tony D'Angelo? Like, what is he saying?
I don't have any idea. How if a guy is obviously visually a gangster, an Italian, I know they don't have a mafia type of thing.
No.
But if they did,
if they did, that'd be something. I will say, I'm not going to totally shoot down that one, because if you really think about timing wise, that would have been right before The Sopranos. So timing wise, it may have worked out.
With Tom Brandi and Rick Bogner.
Well, no, I'm not saying. When you add the details, then it kind of kills it.
I mean, Tom Brandi is Italian.
Yes.
And
sincerely Italian, yeah.
Sincerely, I don't know about Bogner. Is Bogner an Italian name? All righty. Remember Brackus.
Oh, who could forget Brackus?
His real name was Achim Albrecht, and he was a German bodybuilder with a freakish physique and nice guy, and even the combined efforts of Tom Pritchard, Dory Funk Jr., and everybody else involved could not teach him how to wrestle. Brackus. Brackus will be over the same way Ahmed was. By looking at him, everyone will want to be him.
What?
I don't. Either he thought that
He wanted to be Ahmed. Who knew?
or he, now bear in mind who's writing this and who the audience is. He knows that Vince is wrapped up in the physiques and everything. So potentially, but I don't know that anybody ever looked at Brackus and said, I want to be that guy. Especially after they saw him try to wrestle.
Or fight. Wasn't he in Brawl for All?
Yes. And remember, he had the robot arms in a shoot fight. Imagine how he worked. Darren Drozdov. Easy. I love easy. Is he proud? Oh, it's easy. I can figure all this shit out. The Droz is a suicidal, crazed football player who was cut from the NFL because he was unbalanced, a deranged and disturbed McMichael, who was on the other channel, Steve McMichael. I don't think he meant to say that he wanted Droz to be suicidal. I think he was mixing that up with, because, old Shitstain used to watch ECW for all of his ideas because he couldn't figure out any of his own that applied to wrestling. So I think he's more of homicidal or even genocidal. He's going for the Sabu tagline, homicidal, suicidal, genocidal. But he picked out, I don't think he wanted Droz to be depressed.
You remember when they first put out those Sabu shirts? This was the first sign there was real heat between Taz and Sabu. Taz was the person in charge of making the shirts for ECW, at least at that point. And the Sabu shirt said homicidal, not homicidal.
Oh my God.
They misspelled homicidal, so it said homicidal. And a lot of people back then were pointing the fingers at Taz saying, that's how much he hates Sabu. That's what he did. Never proven, though. Never proven.
A lot of people can't spell.
That's true, too.
And when you point a finger at someone else, you have three more pointing back at you. But Lanny Poffo said that one time. The power saw has just started up.
I was going to say, was Lanny blowing himself while you just said that? What was that?
Holy mackerel. Now, come on. He did not have to take any ribs out surgically to be able to do that. That was a complete rumor.
I was naturally limber.
Number 9, the Honky Tonk Man on our list of ideas from our favorite shit stain. Honky Tonk Man, say goodbye. In 1997, the Honky Tonk Man isn't going to cut it no matter how much he entertains us. And this was at the time, you'll recall, when Vince had brought Wayne back to manage Rockabilly, who was Billy Gunn, as they were trying to rehabilitate him. Harley is in the background upset at the contractors for running the power saw downstairs. But she's so cute, we're going to leave it in. And by the way, so Wayne, now you know what Vince Russo thought of you in 1997.
Wait, that was it? That was basically just fire Honky Tonk Man?
That was just fire him. Just fire him. Yeah, don't send him out to do public relations tour because people know who he is from the golden era. Don't fucking have him do radio stations or, on sales or whatever. Just fire him, send him home.
It would have been something if it was like, have him go away and come back all in leather, the comeback special. But no.
Number 10, along these same lines of get the fuck out of here, Fatu. Please forgive me, but I think we've done everything with him that we possibly can. And remember, again, that they'd gone from the Samoan SWAT team to Fatu to the Sultan. He was supposed to be Middle Eastern and wearing the fucking turban. And as a matter of fact, one time, Vince, I've told this story, he called Fatu in to give him his notice. And Afa and Rosie and Jamal came with Fatu to the meeting, and when they left, all four of them had jobs. He not only didn't fire Fatu, he hired the other three. Anyway,
and this is obviously before Rikishi, which would elevate him to a new level.
And finally, so we hadn't done everything with him we possibly could. He just needed to gain another 100 pounds and show his ass. Number 11, Bart Gunn. This one really troubles me. I think he's a keeper, but I don't know what you do with him. In looking at Bart, again, forgive me, you see a good old boy. I don't know why you would forgive someone for saying that. He's a good old boy. I don't know if he's capable of overcoming that. He needs to work on his promos, which doesn't make it any easier. Number 12, Barry Windham. As remember, Windham and Bradshaw were the new Blackjacks, which did wonders for the hair dye industry, but not for either one of their careers. Have him turn on Bradshaw and make him a modern-day redneck bounty hunter. Maybe the hit was made because somebody puts a bounty on the head of the Blackjacks. Little does Bradshaw know, but his partner Windham was the one paid to do the job. That's all they were paying Barry Windham to do at that point was the job.
Do you think the Italian tag team hired him to do the hit?
You know, that would have thrown suspicion away from him. Listen to the next one. So, Barry Windham, make him a bounty hunter, whatever, but Eric Watts was still under contract from that Techno Team thing, right?
Techno Team 2000, him and Chad Fortune.
This is what he has to say. Could have elite potential. Read on, elite in quotation marks. We're going to pause on that one for a second.
So the original elite wrestler was Eric Watts?
Hold on. Justin Bradshaw. What else can he be besides a badass cowboy, a real believable shit kicker? Justin Hawk Bradshaw was a gimmick. Make him a badass cowboy, Dustin Rhodes with an edge. Justin Hawk Bradshaw was a gimmick, but Justin Bradshaw as a cowboy is not a gimmick. Anyway.
Now, he didn't spend a lot of time at the bar with the wrestlers, right?
No. And
so in terms of trying to figure out who Bradshaw was for real versus the gimmick, what his knowledge would just be backstage conversations.
Backstage in the locker room or on the phone or whatever. And I'm not saying I didn't spend any time in the bar either, but I knew what the fuck the wrestling business was about. But here we go at the end. Well, I'm going to transpose these last two. The last one on the list is Yokozuna. Yokozuna joined forces with Furnace, LaFon, and the Patriot, the soldiers of the rising sun. Or he could become a member of the Hart Foundation.
Are there any details about how he would do that?
Yes. Here's the details. There's a lot of history there, so it could make perfect sense. That's the explanation for why Yokozuna would join the Hart Foundation.
What history?
That they'd wrestled each other, I guess. But anyway, the last two names. Rockabilly and Jesse James.
Oh.
Which, of course, would become Billy Gunn and Road Dogg, right?
The New Age Outlaws, yeah.
Well, remember, Eric Watts could have elite potential. With Rockabilly and Jesse James, not easy, but simple. Simple. All you people you're just idiots, because this is simple. Billy Gunn and Jesse James can join Shawn and Hunter as members of the Elite.
He calls them the Elite?
He calls them because there was no Degeneration X at this point. Behind the scenes, these guys are a natural fit. Just let them be themselves and it'll work like a charm. Maybe Watts can fit in this group. Maybe. Can you have seen it? Billy Gunn, Road Dogg, Shawn Michaels, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and Eric Watts.
You know what? If you want to say anything good about Vince Russo, he was certainly trying to do something nice for Bill Watts.
But wait a minute. There's also another couple of suggestions. He says maybe Watts can fit in this group. Maybe he can't. Christopher can. He's talking about Brian Christopher. Christopher could have, and actually Brian Christopher, as a over-the-top personality and a smartass would have fit right in, maybe. And then the last line, I swear to God, I'm reading this. I have it on paper. I will have it notarized if anybody believes I'm making it up. He's gone through the people that could be members of the Elite. Shawn Michaels, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, possibly Billy Gunn, Jesse James, Road Dogg, maybe Eric Watts, maybe not, Brian Christopher, and the last line, Sonny can fit if you let them abuse her.
Come on!
I swear to God!
Why would they have to abuse her for her to fit in this?
Because apparently all all cool guys abuse their female fucking tag-along, is according to the ideas that this guy has. And he has to use the word abuse. But anyway, that's there's some more ideas from the font of knowledge.
It started with abuse, it ended with abuse, and in the middle, he invented the elite.
So, but now, now that it all makes sense, because I've been seeing the current modern day elite thinking, well, that's an idea that Shitstain would have had. And son of a bitch, it was.
Well, it's too bad that instead of writing down some of these ideas, it may be helpful for some people to get on the phone with someone and talk these ideas out, speak to someone who could help.
It would have been a good idea if he had talked to anybody about any of these things before he blurted them out in public. But folks, if you don't want to blurt things out in public, but you need somebody to talk to in private, you know who to call, and that's our friends at BetterHelp. Because, for example, we've talked about this so many times. If you had only one car for the rest of your life, would you take care of it? If you had only one of anything for the rest of your life, couldn't get another one, would you take care of it? Well, of course you would, but that's how our brains work. And I'll have you know that 99% of us on the face of the planet will only have one brain through the course of our lifetime, because that surgery is still experimental and it's a long wait list for those donors. So how we care for our minds affects how we experience life. It's time to invest time and care into yourself and your gray matter. You can learn a new language, keep yourself quick and nimble, or you can take power naps to make sure you're well rested, but you can also make yourself available to BetterHelp online therapy, because it's online therapy that offers video and phone and even live chat-only therapy sessions. You don't have to be on camera. You don't have to go anywhere in person. You don't have to drive on the interstates these days. My God, it's death-defying, the traffic. You don't have to mess with any of that. You just connect online, and it's more affordable than in-person therapy. And the folks at BetterHelp can match you up with a therapist in under 48 hours. And right now, our listeners get 10% off their first month's services. BetterHelp.com/JCE. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/JCE. So if you have some unwanted individual in your life constantly sending you stupid ideas, and you need somebody to talk to about that or anything else, BetterHelp.com/JCE for 10% off your first month's services. Keep your brain revved up, lubricated, nimble and quick, and in good shape. Brain food. My mom used to talk about that when I was a kid. So-and-so is brain food. What is brain food, Brian? Do you remember? I don't remember what Mama Cornette said.
Salmon is considered brain food.
Well, that's true, because that Rushdie fella, he's a noted published author. He's very intelligent, so
you're confusing him with Sal Bass, but we get the point.
I thought it was Saul Bass. Is it Sal Bass? Or is it Saul Good? It's all good.
You watch Better Call Saul? Then. They just wrapped it up. Everyone's talking about it.
Here's the goddamn thing is, I have to go back, and I think I mentioned this to you. I did not realize there was a new season until the new season was underway, and then I was confused as to what order to watch the episodes in. So I don't have any knowledge of what's going on, but I'm waiting till it's all over with, and then I get them all in order, and I just do the whole thing.
Did you watch Breaking Bad?
I never watched Breaking Bad, but I started watching Better Call Saul when they spun it off, and I enjoyed that.
Can you see yourself after finishing Better Call Saul going back and seeing Breaking Bad?
Well, if somebody pays me appropriately, I can see myself doing that, but I'm waiting for the right offer.
Okay, you need to be bribed to watch one of the greatest television shows of all time.
Well, I'm waiting to see if anybody will do it, and that would be good. If not, I can just watch it for free, I guess, but somebody will pay me sooner or later.
All right, well, I don't know about that, but we'll see what happens. Jim, we're going to move on here with the show somehow. I don't know how that's going to happen either. But you mentioned you were going through the files. Anything else you have found?
Yes, I got a letter real quick before we get to some of the good stuff. I got a letter from somebody that you know or you knew at this period of time. And this is a letter to Vince McMahon dated November 10th, 1997. It was received in the office and stamped by Linda McMahon and then carbon copied to the creative team under Vince, which at the time was me and Shitstain. And I've kept this and I just ran across it. I'm going to blank out the name at the start. Dear Vince, hi, this is blank. I, as you know, have been a follower of the WWF for some 38 years, and after last night, I must say I am disgusted with the WWF and the treatment of Bret Hart. I know he is going to the WCW, but after all he did for the WWF, he did deserve better. The fans were cheated. We all wanted to say goodbye to Bret at the Garden, which was always one of his favorite places. You have robbed us of that too. I will never be a loyal supporter of the WWF again. I will be mailing a much longer letter soon. I just wanted you to know I definitely will be moving on to the WCW to follow Bret Hart and the others, because what was done last night is unforgivable. Of course, this is talking about the Survivor Series finish. Montreal. My phone has not stopped ringing since 6 a.m. this morning. All the WWF supporters are turning on you, Vince. This time you really did it. I don't think your father would be very proud of you now. One of my callers just ordered merchandise and will be canceling the order. She said she will no longer support your company. Another is bringing back her MSG tickets and refuses to support someone who has backstabbed Bret after he went on Raw just days after major surgery on his leg. Mr. McMahon, you have turned all the fans against you and the company. Regretfully yours, Georgianne Macropolis.
That's what I thought. That's exactly what I thought. When you said 38 years and you mentioned the Garden, I knew right away who it was.
The biggest WWF fan, the most beloved grandmotherly figure to the wrestlers and the fans in the New York area who had been the supporter. And of course, I think she calmed down and, I would imagine she continued watching programs after this initial.
The other thing is, just to point out, the impact of this getting there. And it's interesting the fact that it was passed on to the creative team. But Georgianne had been a regular at ringside going back to the early 60s. I believe her grandfather originally had the seats and she got them from him. She's always there. If you go back and watch any footage from the 70s, it's the same seat all the time. She had those seats into the 90s because I was friends with her and she would, when there was a show she didn't want to go to, she would give me her seats. Well, she'd let me purchase her seats from her.
Right.
Or sometimes if she had an extra ticket, I can go and sit in those second row seats on the aisle at MSG. She was always there. She supported Vince and the WWF to the point where just a few years before that, in 94, I believe she was at the trial every day on Long Island. And afterwards, Vince and Linda brought Georgianne and a few other people up to their house to spend the day with them out of appreciation for the support. So when you hear a letter like this, 3 years later, it really is stunning.
And of course, Georgianne, it was always
And she knew his dad.
Yeah. Well, it was the rumor because she was the one mentioned. Georgianne in 62, 63 was the president of Bruno Sammartino's fan club.
And Buddy Rogers.
And was also, I didn't know she had a Rogers fan club, but she was friends to the point where she went over to Rogers and Sammartino's houses and talked to their wives. And apparently, and some maybe innocently, she's the one that found out that Rogers was talking about it in some way trying to take over the territory, run opposition, or do something to strong-arm Vince Sr. into doing something, and apparently blabbed that information to Bruno, who then turned around and told Vince Sr., who then, that was the same time as the heart problems were going on. It makes more sense now. Was Rogers thinking, I'm going to have to get out of the ring. I've got a bad heart. Is there a way I can take over this territory? But he got found out, and boom goes the dynamite. Didn't happen.
What do you think Vince's reaction to a letter like that was? The fact that Georgianne, a fan, who was connected, but a fan, can get a letter to him. It's read by Linda, who probably read more of the mail than Vince in general, let's be honest.
Oh, well, and the carbon copies were to me and to fucking Russo, not to Vince. I don't know, but he probably would have had cause to pause for a letter from Georgianne. But he knew the situation. He knew what he had to do to begin with. And also he knew that, and this is what happened, sooner or later, everybody's going to get over it. Georgianne was still at the Garden. Mick came back to work, and they ended up getting, the Mr. McMahon gimmick out of the whole thing. So, but for a while there, yeah, a lot of people were blistering the offices of Titan Towers about the treatment of Bret Hart.
And for a long time, Georgianne was as big a Shawn Michaels booster as there was. So that's another telling part of this, the fact that she is so pissed off about the treatment of Bret.
Well, and around about, hold on here, where is it? I got a stack of stuff. 1997 was a rotten year in a variety of ways. Shitstain got the opportunity of a lifetime to join the creative team and did irreparable damage to the wrestling industry as a whole. The double cross, Vince becomes a heel, WCW temporarily overtakes WWF in the ratings, blah, blah, blah. And at that point, that's what really started the Attitude Era, which everybody looks back on fondly. The fans look back on it fondly because that's the last time wrestling was good. A lot of the people in the business that didn't really fully focus on it and understand it look back on it fondly because they were making money and, the buildings were full. But now with the benefit of hindsight, more people look back on it like I was looking at it when it was happening going, this ain't fucking good, because we couldn't follow it. It's never been able to be topped. We hot-shotted it as far as we get, both companies. And then when the war was won, they didn't stop hot-shotting. When the war was lost, I remember WCW was throwing things out there right up to the very end, even though the cause was lost at that point. And the WWF really, until they bought WCW, even when they were firmly in the lead the last, year and a half, never slowed down. Because that was always the art to the thing. If you had to hotshot to get people back in the buildings of your territory, don't do it too long or you will burn the whole thing out permanently. And that's what happened with the benefit of hindsight. It's been steadily declining for 21 years now. But I found something else that I hadn't thought about in 25 years, that now as I look with all the other happenings that we were in the middle of at the time, I didn't realize the lasting impact they were going to have, just the chaos at the moment. But what happened between February and May of 1997, there was originally Shawn and Bret's rematch was planned for WrestleMania, but Shawn in Lowell, Massachusetts on the Raw in February, lost his smile and decided he had it was at February or early March, lost his smile, decided that he had a career-ending knee injury and relinquished the WWF title, and threw the goddamn WrestleMania plans into turmoil to where Vince went back to, what he always knew, which was big guys. But in this case, it became Undertaker and Sid, which was never a goddamn, going to be a Matt classic. But also at the time, it wasn't what had been being pointed to, what had been being built. And then also the co-feature match was Bret Hart and Steve Austin, which ended up being one of the great matches of all time in the WWF, but not a money-drawing match at the time because that hadn't been where the destination that they were pointing to as well on the TV build. So everything was up in the air. So Michaels turns the title in, relinquishes his smile, there's a Final Four on February 16th, 1997 on the In Your House pay-per-view to determine the champion between Bret Hart, Steve Austin, Undertaker, and Vader. And that, because it was, last-minute promotion, did 154,800 buys. And that wasn't particularly great, but what was worse was WrestleMania in March from Chicago, Rosemont Horizon, with Sid and Taker and Bret and Austin, the changed plans, did 275,000 buys. The year before, in 96, with Shawn and Bret in the Iron Man match, it had done 437,000 buys, and they didn't think that was all that great. So it dropped over 160,000 buys because of the last minute blah, blah, blah. Then, about that time, I think the first week of March, was when they did the broadcast, the Raw television program, simulcast from Germany and wherever, where they played the tapes from Germany with live commentary. I've talked about this. That's where Vince got pissed because the overnight rating came in a 2.0. And the Raw ratings had not been good for the previous several weeks to begin with. And that's when Vince goes crazy and brings in the goofball, sending in all the ideas to make him part of the creative team. So that was late February, March, and into April 97. And then comes a survey from the USA Network. I found this. This is a 15-page document that I'd forgotten about because, again, I'd seen these in WCW when Turner Broadcasting would poll their employees or get people on the street, ask them a question or two, and they would send in shit like, well, Eddie Gilbert and Kevin Sullivan, maybe you could make them the team of Gilbert and Sullivan. And shit like that, and just inane. And the Jim Herd kind of shit. Well, if we had a one-legged wrestler, we could make him Long John Silver and tie it into the movie. So I never looked at these things because they're all fucking caca, right? But I look at this now, and I look at all the other documents that I found. This sheet that has all the Raw ratings for each week, and then the pay-per-view buy rates once a month, and the money matches, so you can see who was on top and what they drew. And I see the Raw, not only the Raw that Shawn Michaels lost his smile on was a special Thursday night episode because I think that we got preempted that week due to the dog show or some shit. Talk about a dog show. But all this stuff's going on at the same time. Vince's champion goes home. His WrestleMania tanks. The TV ratings, because everybody told him that Germany thing was a shitty show and a shitty idea, and he wouldn't listen. So, boom, the ratings are bad, and the USA Network on May 22nd sends him this survey. And all these, and this survey went to Shane McMahon, Linda McMahon, Jim Ross, Jim Cornette, Vince Russo, Kevin Dunn, a guy named Jim Bell who was in marketing, Basil DeVito who was in the office, and some, I don't know. I can't read that scribbling.
No Bruce?
You know what? Well, no, at this point, because remember, Bruce was in the office now. So Bruce didn't get copied this because me and Shitstain were the creative team. That became the problem. When Bruce was around, he was a buffer between me and the other guy. Because Bruce can put on that cheerful face and talk pleasantly and coexist with anybody, right? Neither me nor Shitstain had those fucking qualities. So without him in between us, we're ready to fucking go for each other's eyes. But anyway, Wayne Becker from USA Network, he was one of the executives at USA in charge of, well, he's vice president sports programming. That's what his goddamn letterhead says. And he worked under Bonnie Hammer, who Vince always worked with on the Raw episodes on USA because she was the boss of USA at that point. And he says, Dear Vince, attached is a copy of the final report from last month's focus groups. I trust you will find it comprehensive, but if you have any questions, give me a call. So here's what they did. Some guy named Alan Browdy got a fax from some guy named Ed Wolf and another guy named Art Savitt about their WWF on USA focus groups. Apparently what they did was they went somewhere in 2 cities and they found some people that I'm about to describe, and they asked them questions about the wrestling programs. A series of 4 focus group interviews were conducted with key viewing segments. One session was recruited to consist of male teens 15 to 16 years of age, half of whom regularly watch and prefer Raw, and half of whom regularly watch and prefer Nitro. Do you know how they defined how they regularly watch Raw or Nitro?
No.
If they watch it at least once a month, they said that was a regular watcher.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Of course it is. Because it's a television company doing a focus group on wrestling. And they don't know who the fucking wrestling fans are, or where to find them, or what they fucking are watching to begin with. Then they did 2 sessions recruited to consist of men 20 to 29 years of age. Half regularly watch Nitro, half regularly watch Raw. And a session with men 30 to 39 years of age, half of whom occasionally watch Raw and half of whom occasionally watch Nitro.
What's occasionally?
The adults, 20 to 29, they call it regularly if they watch twice a month or more. And the 30 to 39-year-old men, occasionally is once a month for them. So basically, and here's another thing. Where is this? In addition, all respondents had cable or a dish at home and were able to name on an unaided basis current WWF and WCW wrestlers.
That's good. They didn't need aid. They didn't need help.
So, and here's the thing. They also said, in reading the findings of this study, the following caution should be kept in mind. Qualitative information drawn from small samples cannot be precise as to how many consumers hold one opinion over another, nor can it represent their entire range of opinions and attitudes. The report inevitably contains a certain amount of interpretation on the part of the analyst. And they don't tell you how many people were in these groups. So basically, what they've done is they've found a small groups of males, 15 to 16, 20 to 29, and 30 to 39, that either watch one or other of the wrestling shows once or twice a month. And guess where they did the focus groups, Brian?
USA Network, Los Angeles and New York?
No. It might have come out better if they had. Kansas City and Atlanta.
Interesting.
Kansas City may technically be a neutral location, although it wasn't the strongest wrestling market in the world for anybody to begin with. But Atlanta, they expected to find WWF fans in Atlanta in 1997. And it says, in terms of actual representation obtained across all 4 sessions, Nitro versus Raw preference ran at about 65 to 35. So their own study says 65% of the people prefer Nitro. Because half the study was done in Atlanta. So anyway, here's the summary of the key findings, Brian, from the USA Network survey. While most respondents were aware that Nitro and Raw were on TV on Monday evenings and they were now head-to-head for 2 hours, viewing for most was non-ritualistic and not a mental appointment.
So they're not wrestling fans.
They're not wrestling fans. They watch, teenagers watch once a month. and these adults that they found wherever once, twice a month were good. Now, needless to say, there were a few teens and a few frequent viewers who religiously turned to Raw or Nitro at the proper time. However, these devoted few were a clear minority. Respondents also reported surfing from one to the other depending on who's wrestling, current storyline, amount of action versus talking, type of match, and commercials. Thank you, Captain Obvious. Taping of the shows, viewing reruns, and Saturday specials viewing occur frequently among the most avid of fans. We would have never had a way to know that otherwise. Okay, here's the strengths and positives about the WWF. The viewers were positive about WWF for its having several name wrestlers. Undertaker, seen as savage but highly regarded. Psycho Sid, scary, crazy, and unpredictable. Steve Austin. And here was the tip-off that they were in Atlanta. Steve Austin, seen as someone who would be a good horseman. Looks mean. Bret Hart.
Wait, do you think they had any idea when someone said he looks like he would be a good horseman that they meant a group that's in WCW as opposed to someone who should be on a horse?
No, they didn't. They have no idea. It's USA Network people that didn't know anything about wrestling, finding people on the street or wherever and asking them about wrestling. Bret Hart is described as a pretty boy crybaby who whines a lot.
So Vince was in the survey.
Well, and British Bulldog, capable but crybaby. The heel, this at the time where Bret was starting to be anti-America, the pro-Canada thing, Bret and Davey and the Hart Foundation. The Canada versus USA, so he's whining. He's a crybaby. Listen to this. WWF is seen as having good technical wrestlers, such as Mexicans. Some see the WWF as having powerful wrestlers with good power moves. And by the way, obviously, this is when on the WCW is bringing in the cruiserweights, so they've mixed that up. We had a very brief dalliance with, remember, trying to work with Pena, and that didn't work out.
But that would have been around this period of time in 97, where they would have had luchadors appearing randomly on Raw and at the Royal Rumble earlier that year.
Yeah, but were any of those guys people you would consider good technical wrestlers instead of the fucking guys they had, fucking Mysterio and everybody in WCW?
I thought WCW had the better crop of luchadors.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the point. Anyway, here are more strengths of the WWF. The production is highly regarded, especially the glitziness of the noise, music, smoke, and lights. The announcers are well-liked. Attractive and sexy women are a plus, particularly Sunny, who was mentioned as an emerging personality. WWF camera work was singled out and mentioned as a positive. WWF has an acknowledged history and heritage. Viewers respect that the WWF has been around longer and is the older league. Because they had no idea where the other one came from. WWF weakness and negatives. The WWF was criticized for sometimes being boring, that it allows too many lulls in the action or not enough sustained action. You're going to see a theme here. Basically, WCW was already hot-shotting and already trying to fucking throw everything on the wall and see what would stick. And Vince didn't want to do that because he didn't want to damage his business, but things are getting to the point where he's going to have to do something. But then he sees this survey from the network from these fucking casual fans at the mall that watch once a month. And, oh, we need more car wrecks. And here we go. Many felt that WWF does not have enough marquee name wrestlers. Currently, Undertaker and Psycho Sid are seen as the two biggest stars in the WWF because they were just on top at WrestleMania. But can you tell me that any devoted WWF fan at that point in time would have not said Shawn Michaels, Steve Austin, Davey Boy, British Bulldog, Bret Hart, these are the top names, Sid. It was Psycho Sid and Undertaker, two biggest stars. The other marquee names, Bret Hart, British Bulldog, Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels, are not the ones that most of the viewers tune in to watch. There's too much talking and not enough action. WWF storylines are weak, less well-sustained, too predictable, and silly. I'm sure Vince loved seeing this because he hated I used the word silly to the point where Bruce had to tell me stop using the word silly. I said, well, what is a goddamn synonym of silly? There are few perceived up-and-coming inside-the-ring stars. After Undertaker, viewers didn't name anyone new in the WWF who would fit the role of good guy. Viewers clearly felt there was not enough perceived mayhem either in or out of the ring. Fans would like to see such havoc tied to the action of the match and the evolving storyline. An increase of more realistic, parenthetically, i.e. better acted hits, coupled with more realistic, parenthetically, better simulated blood and less bad acting would better serve the viewer. So they think the blood was fake. They want better acted hits and less bad acting. Well, I can get behind that one as well. The fact that WWF offers good technical wrestlers may limit the amount of perceived real violence that it can provide. Too many moves do not satisfy those WWF viewers who have a thirst for more and better portrayed riotous disorder. Oh boy, tag teams in the WWF are seen as weaker than they should be. No WWF standout marquee tag team other than the Legion of Doom was ever mentioned or discussed. Imagine that, even the casual fans pick up on that. Bing, bing, bing. Again, the WWF is thought to have too many pretty boys in its stable of wrestlers. Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Hunter Hearst Helmsley. You think Bret would have fucking liked being called a pretty boy? WWF wrestlers, the matches, the action, and violence are seen as being overly staged, fake, and obviously preordained. Brian?
Yes?
It's almost like if there was somebody that was saying, hey, we should do more real-looking shit instead of this phony, silly. And if they thought it was phony and silly in 1997, what would they think now?
It's really a rejection of Vince's brand of wrestling at that time.
Yes. And in bad matchups abound, too often WWF will pit one champion contender level wrestler against a powder puff good guy. Or whatever, mismatches. WCW strengths and positives. WCW provides its viewers with numerous storylines, not just one or a few. These are being seen as suspenseful and original with lots of unexpected twists. Now you see where he wants to go. WCW is seen as constantly reshaping and evolving its characters and wrestlers. WCW is seen as having the most popular wrestlers and known names. And what do you think Vince saw when he read these known names? Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Roddy Piper, Ric Flair, Sting, the NWO, and the Four Horsemen. WCW affords the viewer with action both in and out of the ring with unpredictable outcomes. WCW is seen to be intense and hardcore in its matches, dialogues, action, in and out of the ring, and its promos. WCW shows brawls, provides visceral excitement, is mean-spirited, and seemingly violent. Controversy is seen as one more perceived positive aspect about WCW. And here's their weaknesses. They are seen as not providing enough technical wrestling with good, clean, scientific moves and holds. Bischoff and the other WCW announcers are negatively perceived. There are too many hangers-on involving entourages. They are seen as not wrestling as much as they are promoting, posturing, talking up, and stirring up emotions. And evil over good is also the pervasive storyline theme constantly shown by the WCW. So basically, they're telling Vince, hey, Vince, you've been doing the same thing for a while and people don't believe your stuff anymore because you got too silly. And the work with the guys was not as bad at that point as they made it out to be in this report. But in WCW, they were doing more wrestling angles and more wrestling bullshit. But they were also all over the place and it was chaos. And that can be attractive to a viewer. However, as we saw WCW, this was when they were getting hot and they got hot and didn't know what to do with it. And 3 years and 11 months from the time that this was written, they were out of business after losing $60 million the previous 18 months. So the chaos draws eyeballs, but you can't build a whole company on chaos and keep it that way.
During this period of time, to the best of your knowledge, did Vince watch any of the competitive product more than he had before or after?
Well, more than he had before or after would have been any, because he never did. And no, he'd get the Finkel report. If somebody specifically said, Vince, look at this clip or look at this commercial spot or whatever, but I don't know that he ever, maybe he did it at home alone like other people watch German porn, where he closed the drapes and made sure nobody else was home and then watched it, but not in front of anybody. But that was the thing. It was more wrestling and more, well, we've talked about this a million times. Hall and Nash kicked it off. They thought there was an invasion. And then Hogan switches heel, and there's a fresh coat of paint on the legendary icon. And then Bischoff gets the checkbook to where he can hire a few more people. And then the tide starts turning. And it's also still at the heart of it down south, a wrestling program. So they're more violent. They're doing more angles. But they're really fucking hitting the gas pedal. And, you know, unfortunately, if Vince wanted to do wild-ass wrestling angles, he had, 5 people on the fucking already in the company working there that could have done him wild-ass wrestling. But he decided he wanted to do the wild-ass Jerry Springer show. And there was only one person there that could or would be willing to pitch shit like that. And that's where we ended up with that kind of chaos. Instead of the wrestling chaos, we just had chaos. But thankfully, I don't know that we would have won the war had it not been for Austin and The Rock. Because, and the fact that Bischoff and none of them down south knew how to run a wrestling company for any length of time because they were drunk on the smell of their own farts. But I don't think we would have won without Austin and Rock, because when you go back and look, without Austin and Rock, and there's Taker and Mick and a few other people stepped up, but the creative in the WWF was worse than WCW's. It just, the stars that were doing it were over like God. And their creative was fine. I'm talking about up and down we've talked about those miserable shows and the birthing the hands and the whole 9 yards. But when you get the dreck out of it, what this report basically said was the WWF had got boring and WCW was more exciting, sort of like now. WWF has got massively boring and the show on the Turner Network is more exciting. But the problem becomes then that this time Tony didn't necessarily steal all the stars from Vince. He got them from the indies. And these guys don't know how to keep themselves over, and the chaos eventually burns out. So is this thing going to end up the same way? Now that Vince is gone, he apparently wasn't taking AEW seriously, and I don't blame him when you watch a couple of the shows. But now Triple H is going to. So is he going to make WWF more exciting, but not in such a hokey way as during the Attitude Era, so they can compete with the more exciting program that's less professionally produced and with a infrastructure of running the company that can't compete in any way, shape, or form with the one in Stamford? so is the hot shotting down south going to self-destruct another company. But there are interesting similarities. The point being, all the problems start with the WWF getting boring. And then they got to go too far in the other direction to correct that. But the strengths versus weaknesses analysis is basically this. WCW was seen to have more known names and popular wrestlers, i.e. more stars. And then the opening fucking list of those is Hogan, Savage, Piper, and then Flair. And in Sting, the NWO that all came from Vince and the Four Horsemen, which didn't exist anymore. And the storylines, WCW owns the stronger position because the storylines are more numerous, which is the same thing that Shitstain then tried to do in the WWF, write for everybody. Problem is, when you write for everybody, then you immune people to the angles that only the top people should be doing.
Hey, we've seen hot-shotting in the past. I mean, Jim Barnett famously hot-shotted right when he sold Australia to get the business really popping. And we can understand why it was, in a lot of ways, a necessary component of the Monday Night War, because it was a war. It was two promotions and two shows head-to-head. How do you come back from hot-shotting? Eventually, the hot-shotting has to end, whether it's, a couple months or a month, or whether it's a few years or however many weeks the war was going on. How do you come back from that?
Well, it never lasted a couple years till the Attitude Era, because even in the 80s, when Vince and Crockett were jousting with each other, Vince was not really hot-shotting. He just had an incredible roster and was running 3 shows a night. And Dusty, that wasn't really hot-shotting for Dusty. That's the way Dusty booked. And he learned it from Watts and Eddie Graham, the package shows, and he kept them up. Hot-shotting would be going into Starrcade or whatever, but there was a lot of shit going on with Dusty normally. But hot-shotting with territories would last a matter of weeks or months. If you weren't in a promotional war, but your business was down or you needed to do something, do a heavy angle, do heavy blood, do something violent, something shocking, whatever, and juice that thing up for a few weeks and see if that works. If you're in a promotional war, Sheik and Bruiser, Indianapolis and Detroit, they brought in the top talent they could get, and they put on the biggest cards they could get, and both companies prospered. Indianapolis was never hotter than 72 to 74. Detroit was never hotter. And they got so hot that they would draw in Detroit on the same night. There'd be 20,000 people at live wrestling in Detroit in the same night for the 2 shows. But after eventually Sheik won and that he turned Bruiser away from Michigan and Bruiser won in Indiana, then the Sheik never really invaded, and they agreed to coexist and work together, their territories went downhill from there until they fucking died, because the people had gotten used to the major name talent. The people had gotten used to the big cards. Well, now that they weren't having to fight somebody off, they couldn't have, and they didn't have as many towns, especially Bruiser. He didn't have Detroit once every 2 or 3 weeks to pay guys on. So you get lesser name talent doing lesser stuff because you've already done all the angles and all the blood you can do. And so that was a 2-year period, and that wasn't even rampant hot-shotting on television every week like happens today. So the Attitude Era really was the only time that it went on that long in the history of the business anywhere, because if any just regular territory had done that, they would have gone out of business in 6 months. You can't follow it. And we've been trying to follow it for 20 years. The numbers keep dropping. And I knew that at the time, and I was like, what the fuck? That's why when the WWF had Austin and Rock and Taker and Mankind and that level of talent, and especially Austin and Rock got over, then they should have immediately cut back on doing anything with the underneath guys and saved the angles and saved just save the chaos. Because that wasn't making any difference in the program. But as it was, no. So, yeah, so the answer to how long, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, but never that long.
And I brought up Jim Barnett in Australia. He hot-shotted it. The place was on fire. He sold it, and they were never able to come close for a number of reasons, but they were never able to come close to the levels that it had been before.
Well, and that was an old promoter's trick also. You want to sell a town or you want to sell a territory or whatever, hot-shot it, get business up, bring the guy in that you want to buy it, sees the big crowds, oh, yeah, and then get the fuck out of there before he realizes how you did it. And then just again, with all of this, the strengths and weaknesses. WCW had more action and energy, brawling, hardcore mayhem, which can break out at any point. WWF is more laid back with less destructive, less aggressive action, more often contained in the ring. Imagine that. Violence and blood. WCW, more perceived violence and blood. WWF was ahead in announcers, technical wrestling, production, sexy characters because of Sunny. And the WWF's best wrestlers wrestle, whereas WCW's best don't. Because WCW's biggest stars that we just mentioned, Hogan, Flair, Piper, Sting, they actually would never wrestle on television. Sting was in the rafters. So that's the thing. Basically, some fans at the mall somewhere wanted more chaos in the program. And that's what they decided to do to fight this war.
To go back to the beginning here. So this survey, this focus group, whatever you want to call it, this study, this was commissioned by the USA Network on their own, or they went to Vince and said, this is something we want to do?
No, they did it. They did it. It said there was another similar research was conducted in January of this year. And they just wanted to find out what was going on. And imagine this now. Imagine this. This is a list of whether the fan was watching Raw or Nitro, what was most likely to make them tune out. And again, a lot of these things, they have a firm grasp of the obvious, right? Here's what makes a casual wrestling fan tune out. Anything overly fake. Matches with unknowns. Long, boring holds, headlocks, moves, or anything too scientific. Speeches in the ring. I guess that's why they've started Raw with a 20-minute promo for the last 20 years, right? And again, it obviously depends on who's doing the speech. Steve Austin's going to talk for 20 minutes. That's better than somebody else wrestling for 20 minutes. And also too much dialogue and not enough action. But the kind of things that both Raw and Nitro should be doing more often. And again, if you ask a kid what they want for dinner, 9 out of 10 times they're going to say cheeseburgers and ice cream, right? What kind of things should they do more often on Raw and Nitro? Specialty matches such as cage matches, specialty matches such as strap matches. Even specialty matches with lesser-known wrestlers are exciting. More recognizable wrestlers and more 10-fighter brawls.
This explains a lot.
A typical WWF viewer fan base is seen as comprised of younger teens, preteens, or very older fan with some women because they are attracted to pretty boys. Typical WCW viewer is seen as Southern because they're in Atlanta. Less respectful, a hardcore fan who won't miss a match, a male 18 to 49. That was the WCW fan base that hadn't been run off. They kept waiting for Crockett Promotions to come back. And that's...
The term pretty boy being used so much is interesting.
I know, because I'm thinking, did they get 4 fucking... Because these are all men that were surveyed between 18 and 39. I'm wondering, did they just get like 3 or 4 of each, and 2 guys said, yeah, he's a pretty boy. And that became Bret Hart's the pretty boy Bret Hart. Yeah, to get viewers to spend more time watching Raw, it is indicated that the dynamic of action should be addressed. More action and energy, less talking and dialogue. The action could be made to appear more destructive. See, they've still got to make sure they know it's fake. More intense, more realistic havoc and mayhem. More action outside the ring. More wanton destruction and mayhem are indicated as well. What the fuck? You got fucking 5 meth heads with short attention spans, and this is what fucking ruined the wrestling business.
And again, we have no idea, like you said, in terms of even if you want to apply this study and use these results in a positive way, you don't know how many people were talked to. You don't know really any information that would be tangible.
And Sunny is all over. Apparently, Sunny was the only girl we had then. They loved Sunny. And we should create new and more exciting storylines to increase the level of fan appeal of British Bulldog Bret Hart with an E, H-A-R-T-E, Steve Austin and Psycho Sid, so that WWF is not too reliant on its one overwhelmingly strongest asset, Undertaker. Utilize Sunny to the greatest extent possible. Other sexy women should be introduced and used. Personalities from WWF's heydays, H-A-Y days, heydays, Sammartino and Morales should be brought back and utilized.
Who said this in the fucking
This is the USA Network. Bring in Bruno or Pedro as manager of a new specially tailored team.
Bruno can manage the Italians.
Yeah. Oh, my God. But anyway, there you go. And Vince McMahon was having second thoughts and doubts because of all the stuff that's going on. Like I said, he lost Shawn, he lost the champion. WrestleMania went in the tank. The fucking Raw ratings were down. But again...
Did he ever express to you that he was afraid of losing USA Network?
Well, he always wanted to keep them happy. He never said, we're going to lose them if we don't do something. But he wanted their interest to stay with the program, obviously. But back then, there was no rights fee. I mean, there may have been some kind of production payment. I can't remember. It was negligible if it was. And WWF got some of the commercial time back at that point. But the money was made with live events, merchandise, and pay-per-view. And now, see, here's the thing. Right now, what would they give for a 2.0 Raw rating? That's better than they're doing now, right?
I believe so. I think
still there?
I don't know what the current ratings are. I'd have to check.
Well, I think they were lucky to do a 2 on SmackDown on Fox, but nevertheless, a 2 back then was more people than a 2 is now. That's one thing. But Raw through, I have here 1996 and most of 1997, because along about September of 97, you can see I stopped at September 29th is the last entry, and I just never put anything down. I was on the creative team for another 2 months, but I was fucking mentally ready to fucking commit mayhem anyway. But I'd kept everything scrupulously up till then. But let's go back to January 1996, and the only thing I'm not sure of, because I don't have the number of viewers, I have the rating. And they have changed because the universe of homes have changed, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any way you can Google machine and find out what a 3.0 rating on USA Network in 1996, how many people that was? How would we find that out?
Let me see what I can find out.
While I go from here. Because in January 96, like I said, when I first got this information and first joined the creative team, Raw was doing, as I'm looking, between a 2.4 and a 3.0. Well, there's a February 19th, a 3.1. There's a 3.6. So somewhere between 2.4 and 3.6 was the range for January, February, and March. And then WrestleMania season, it usually kicks up a little bit. And I remember specifically that the April shows, the April 8th Raw did a 4.7. And I believe that is a time where we were unopposed for some reason with WCW. And also I remember Yokozuna and Vader were involved in that. I think that's an angle we did where Vader fucking broke Yoko's leg or something. But the point is that was a 4.7. That was an outlier because of no competition. The others are 2.9, 3.1, 3.3, 3.8. There's a 4.1. We're into May now. May was cooking 3.8, 4.1, 3.5, 3.1. And during that period of time, Bret Hart had been the champion and was still on top. The January pay-per-view, the Royal Rumble, was Bret versus The Undertaker and the Royal Rumble, and that did 312,000 buys. And the February In Your House, that was in Louisville. That did 212,900 buys with Bret versus Diesel as the main event. WrestleMania 12, March 31, 1996, did 437,000 buys. That was the Iron Man match between Shawn and Bret. And then the In Your House in April, I believe that's the one that they pulled off Mad Dog Vachon's phony leg, wasn't it? That was Shawn versus Diesel. That was Shawn's first title defense. That did 228,000.
Hey, Jim, it's not exactly what you asked for, and I'll keep looking. But
Okay.
for instance, I have one from 96, just a list of the top cable shows. And a 3.0 would be approximately, or just under, but just about 2 million households. Not viewers, but households.
Right. Okay, and the formula, as we've talked about back then, this is prehistory, for TV ratings, was what, 1.6 or 1.7 people per household was the way they figured it out. Somewhere around that. So 2 million households was technically around 3 million something people. Not the same thing as today. And anyway, here's where I was going with this. In May 96, remember the In Your House Shawn Michaels British Bulldog match that got knocked off the air from Florence, South Carolina because of the thunderstorm and the power outage?
Of course.
That did 215,000 buys on pay-per-view. How many refunds they gave, I do not know. But then you notice something else. And a lot of people may have overlooked this, but all of a sudden, in June and July, the Raw ratings start to go down. Now we're 2.3, 2.7, 2.3, 2.7, 2.6, 2.5, 2.6, 2.2, 2.1, 2.6, 2.0. That's through August. 2.9. Preempted a couple of weeks for the dog show. 2.4, 2.1. At the same time, the pay-per-view buys seem to be going down. King of the Ring did 204,400 buys with Shawn and Bulldog in the rematch. In Your House in July, 153,300 for Shawn and Sid and Ahmed against Vader and Bulldog and Owen. SummerSlam in August, 207,200 for Shawn and Vader and the Boiler Room match with Taker and Mankind. In Your House, September, 165,200 for Shawn and Mankind. Remember, that was Philly, Mind Games. One of the greatest WWF title matches of all time, but the numbers were going down with Shawn on top. And there was no change in the creative team, me and poor brother Brucey, from the first half of 96 to the second half of 96. There was one major change. We lost Bret Hart, we got Shawn Michaels. And all of a sudden, things started headed south, which is kind of what Bret had in his mind when he dropped the belt to Shawn and went to do Lonesome Dove and took the most of the year off and said, let this guy fucking flop and I'll come back and save it.
The other thing you're starting to see when you look at the ratings is this is right when the NWO happens. So WCW, which had been trending upwards, now it has all the buzz too.
Right. And true. But at the same time, yeah. I'm just telling you, because wait a minute, we're about to see something else. So Survivor Series 96 did 178,800 buys with Shawn versus Sid and Bret versus Austin and Taker versus Mankind. But Shawn Sid was the title match. It was on top. December In Your House, Bret and Sid. Bret is back, but it does 133,000 buys because it's fucking Sid. Then the Royal Rumble 97. Now remember, Royal Rumble 96 did 312,000 buys with Bret and Taker. Royal Rumble 97 with Shawn and Sid, 229,600. And then Shawn loses his smile a few weeks later, and the In Your House Fatal 4-Way that I mentioned earlier in the program, Bret, Austin, Taker, Vader to determine the new champion, does 154,800. Raw ratings are still doing between 2 and 2.6, except for the March 3rd edition that did a 2.0, and actually the second hour did a 1.9. That's when they started splitting up. Either we went to 2 hours, that's when they started splitting the number. Because that second hour at 1.9 is what really lit Vince up.
How do you think, psyche-wise, Shawn dealt with Survivor Series, that match with Sid, where the entire garden turned on him? And the entire garden was cheering Sid like never before. Everything he did, and they were booing everything Shawn did.
Same way he dealt with every other thing related to his psyche. He took some more pills and tried to figure out some way to make everybody else's life miserable.
All right.
So then, WrestleMania 13 in March of 97. Remember, WrestleMania 96 did 437,000 buys, but because of the late change, Sid and Taker, Bret and Austin double main event did 275,000. And there was also a 6-man with Ahmed and the Legion of Doom against the Nation, and that was in Rosemont, Chicago, so that helped the live house. But then something happens, and some other person has attributed it to being some other person being added to the creative team. But somebody else got added too, because right about that time, the Raw ratings, there's some 2 1s, but there's some 2 3s, and there's some 2 6s and 2 8s. And then by the end of April, there's a 3 3 and a 3 4, and there's a 3 5. And the summertime dropped down in the 2s a little bit because summer does, because of television. But there were still a few 3s. But guess what the main events were on the pay-per-views that started to at least pick up a bit from down at 133 and 150. In Your House, April 96, Undertaker versus Mankind and Austin versus Bret, 174,500. In Your House, May 97, Taker Austin, 186,700. June 97, King of the Ring, which unfortunately Taker versus Farouk and Shawn versus Austin was in there, as well as the King of the Ring tournament, 141,000.
How long after they went to monthly pay-per-views is this? That was the year before? That was this year?
No. They went to monthly in late 95, right? Yeah, because this is 96 and 97. July 97 was, of course, the incredible 10-man tag team match. They did the 10-man brawl that was recommended in the USA Network survey. The 10-man with Austin, Shamrock, Goldust, and the Legion of Doom against the Hart Foundation in Calgary at the Calgary Stampede International Incident. That only did 166,000 buys on pay-per-view, but goddamn, what a match and what a crowd. And then Undertaker against Bret at SummerSlam in August with Shawn referee was back up 234,000. And obviously Austin versus Owen was underneath that, where Austin's neck was injured. And then September, the last one that I have recorded here, was the price increase, where they brought the In Your House price up to the regular pay-per-view price, and that for Taker against Shawn and Bret against the Patriot did 155,000. And that was Taker versus Shawn to come back with the Hell in a Cell rematch and debut Kane in October at Bad Blood. And I have that written down, but I don't have the numbers because that's when I zoned out. But also the Raw numbers for August and September, actually September was preempted because of dog show business or whatever the fuck, a couple of weeks, and they did the Friday night's main event thing. But the Raw numbers were back to 2.1, 2.4, 2.3, 2.7, 2.6, 2.5. This is where they settled in. But the pay-per-view numbers picked up a bit with Undertaker on top instead of Austin, or instead of Shawn, similar to what they were with Bret before Shawn. And then the next year, 98, starting with Austin, they'd goddamn blow through the roof. So I never put this together because at the time you're in the middle of it, right? But now with all the hindsight of everything's gone on for the last 25 years, maybe we shouldn't have fucking blistered Kevin Nash so much for being the lowest drawing WWF champion of all time. Because Shawn didn't do a world of good either. And the TV ratings went down despite no change in anything else in the talent roster, no change in the creative team, and no real change in the television program. The ratings went down and the buys went down when Shawn became champion. And when he lost it back, and we featured other people on top of the pay-per-view, numbers went back up, and the TV numbers stabilized, depending on what was going on, as you mentioned, with the NWO over across the street. So,
that's the thing that's always bothered me. And I've always said, Shawn Michaels, you can't ever take anything away from him talent-wise. And I think his return in 2002, 2003.
Well, yeah, then nostalgia.
Yeah, and then,
plays a big part.
He was a very smart worker in the ring when he wanted to be. And he could also be, go watch that Hogan match. If you ever want to sympathize with Hogan, go watch that match. And imagine being a frail old Hulk Hogan dealing with this whippersnapper Shawn Michaels behaving like this all around him. But even the biography of DX and various things, anything WWE puts out, Shawn Michaels, at the time, he was having great matches, but I don't think fans wanted that Shawn Michaels. And what I mean is, if you go watch Shawn Michaels when he first turned heel, you go watch Shawn Michaels the early days of Raw, before he became a babyface and Vince started gushing about him in a way that no one else was. Women weren't gushing about him the way Vince was. And he became something that people didn't want to see. And at the same time, he was miserable. Self-admittedly, he was on drugs. And there was something about him. I don't think people have ever talked about Shawn having go-away heat with a lot of the audience for a lot of that period of time. But I've always thought it was a very real thing.
Well, he had go-away heat with the boys in the locker room, a lot of them, so I'm sure he had go-away heat with the guys in the audience. And that was the thing. Shawn Michaels was a tremendous in-ring performer, and that was a classic heel gimmick. The sexy boy, the boy toy, the prancing, the dancing, the flipping the hair, the blah, 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 the whole overdone fucking ludicrous outfit. And one of the seamstresses, they were sisters, Julie and Terry. And Terry was wonderful. She was the older one. She was very level-headed. Julie was the one that was in love with Shawn Michaels and she made all those outfits, the cap and the leather chaps and the whole thing, and she would wear to come to do the seamstressing backstage. She'd wear her miniature version of Shawn Michaels' outfit. And I'm like, oh my fucking God. So Terry did all of my stuff. I was afraid Julie'd put itching powder in it because she knew how I felt about Shawn Michaels. But that's the thing is, it was a great heel gimmick. But when Vince wanted to make him a babyface, the boyhood dream, to be the WWF champion, all that, Shawn Michaels was not a nice guy. He was not a friend. He wasn't Mick Foley. The people fell in love with Mick Foley, the person, because they could see what a genuinely wonderful human being he was. And Shawn Michaels was the antithesis of that at that point in time. And the guys didn't like him because he was dancing and doing the fucking hair flipping, and they could tell he was an obnoxious, self-absorbed prick. And they didn't like that the girls still loved him. The girls were screaming for him, and the guys didn't like that. The same thing that happened in Memphis with the Fabs and the rock and roll in Louisiana. Sometimes the guys would turn on them when they got too popular with the girls. But then the guys would still pick him over the fucking heel because, after all, the heels were heels.
But that Sid match. I mean, go back to that Sid match I talked about at Survivor Series.
Then you go to New York and that fucking jaded, obnoxious crowd, and Sid not ever being a hot heel, having no heat because he looked like God. He looked like $1 million. And remember, we watched the match from one of the WCW pay-per-views.
Bash 89, yeah.
Bash 89. Spivey would tag in and they'd chant, "We want Sid." They'd boo him out of the building.
Yeah.
And then Sid would tag in and he could do no wrong because they just wanted to see him do that shit. So that's, again, New York, even the girls liked Sid instead of Shawn. But most places, the guys didn't like Shawn as a babyface. They could tell that he was not a nice person like a Mick Foley. And if they ever met him in person, that would be borne out. And it didn't work as this boyhood. Vince saw the boyhood dream becoming reality. But a lot of the fans saw this fucking entitled little fucking smartass prick being shoved down their throats.
Well, eventually, I think that's exactly around this period of time. And I think people felt it about Triple H afterwards, but these are like two of the first guys that kind of had that feeling of Vince is shoving them down our throats he thinks much higher of them than we do. And he's not going to give up on this.
Yeah. Well, that's what that was. But there are interesting numbers and surveys from a very interesting time. Take them as you will. But there was no real great business increase in 1997 in the WWF as long as Shawn was champion. And then,
Tyson, Austin, period.
It was Tyson, Austin, WrestleMania 98 that kicked the whole thing off.
Jim, talking about all this, you have to wonder, you think about all the different people involved. You think about Vince, Triple H, Shawn, Pretty Boy, Bret Hart, all the various people involved in this. One name you haven't mentioned is Jose Lothario, and that's probably because while Shawn was out partying and drinking and getting into fights with multiple groups of Marines all at once, all by himself, Jose was looking for the right parts for the car to get Shawn to the next town.
You really had to reach on that one, didn't you?
I need to get Jose tied into this.
I was wondering how the fuck Jose Lothario was going to become a mechanic in all of this, and it really never panned out. But I'll tell you one thing. Actually, what Shawn should have done was brought Jose to all those bars where he was pissing off all those Marines, because Jose could have knocked you out with that right super sock. Jose Lothario, he could have hit you so hard your kids would be born dizzy and you'd be arrested for WRAF, walking recklessly and attempting to fall. But folks, if you are driving recklessly and attempting to fail, then that's where you need the folks at RockAuto, because they got a part for anything you're driving. If you're driving a car, they got the parts for it. If you're driving a truck, they got a part for it. If you're driving a nail, they've got you a hammer. They will fix you up in fine fashion, boy. Because the folks at RockAuto.com are a family business. They've been serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. And some of those customers are getting sick and tired of waiting for checkout. It's been 20 years. They got other things to do. They need to get finished so they can move along with their lives.
Everyone receives their items on time and promptly from RockAuto.com.
Even if it takes 20 years. You can go to RockAuto.com right now and shop for the auto and body parts that you need from hundreds of manufacturers. Some of these people are actually licensed and qualified to make these things. They've got everything at RockAuto.com, from engine control modules and brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, and even a Framostat cartridge for your new obligator. Have you ever seen those obligacators?
No, that's a new one for me.
The obligator, if you get a new one, you need a Framostat chart, or elsewise you won't be able to put it together. And you can quickly at RockAuto.com see all the parts available and choose the brand, specifications, and prices that you prefer, because this is not a brick and mortar store where you have to walk up to the front door and you have to knock. And somebody has to say, "Who is it?" And Harley then starts barking. I should have known not to do that. And then as Harley's barking and the people say, "Who is it?" you give the secret sign. You say, 24/7. and then they'll say 365, and then the door opens and you're allowed in. And then they have all the parts at these brick and mortar stores. They have them under black sheets. So you have to get under there and you have to look at them because they don't want everybody to know they've got them because they don't have enough of them. They might sell out, cause a riot.
No, they have plenty of parts and they're available for everyone to see.
No, I'm not talking about RockAuto.com.
Oh.
I'm talking about these brick and mortar stores.
Oh.
Where you have to knock and give the sign and they let you in, and then you got to look at everything under cover of darkness because they only have a few of these kinds of parts, so they don't have all of them. They're going to probably con you and pass something off as something you need, even if it's not what you need, because that's all they got. And then getting out of it, then you're going to go out in the parking lot and you're going to find out in the parking lot of that brick and mortar store, somebody has come along and stripped your car. And then you got to go back in the store and get all the parts to replace the ones that were stolen. You can go to rockauto.com on your computer and nobody's going to steal a goddamn thing. They can't even get in your house. If while you're on your computer on rockauto.com buying a part for your car or truck, somebody breaks into your house and steals the computer, call the police because they shouldn't do that. And when you go to rockauto.com for the reliably low prices and all the parts your car will ever need and the amazing selection, then you write JCE in the How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know we sent you. And we are completely also absolved of any burglaries that have taken place because we're cleared. After all, that's somebody else that stole that shit. RockAuto.com right now. If you don't need get a part that you don't need because sooner or later all these fucking things break. And then you're going to need it. So if I were you right now, I'd go to rockauto.com and get about 4 or 5 different parts that still work on your car now, but that would prevent it from working in the future if they go out. And then you'll have them. Just take them, put them in the trunk of your car and take them with you. Because if you've got them in your garage and your car breaks down on Interstate 65, just somewhere outside of Huntsville, then you're not going to be able to goddamn get the part and put it on your... So put all the auto parts in the trunk of your car. You'll have them all together. When your car breaks down, you can fix them. RockAuto.com.
That's right. I don't know how to recover from these spots sometimes. I don't know where to go from here.
What else you want to know?
Well, let me ask you about something that, sadly, I have to ask you about because we've received tremendous feedback, especially on Twitter, so I know you've seen it, and even via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com, footage of what is, I believe, Jon Moxley wrestling for GCW against a wrestler named Effie. And as I say, we received a lot of this.
I've seen him. His name ought to be F.U.
Well, we've received this clip or variations of this clip. Apparently there are different angles from way too many people.
Well, it became one of those things on the internet because people couldn't believe the sight that they were seeing with their own 2 eyes. We've talked about Plumber Moxley. And actually, I'm thinking about having to change that name because I was actually reminded by one of the fine professionals from Tom Drexler, plumbing, electric, and heating and air, that plumbers are highly specialized technicians that go to school and they train and they work hard and they got a lot to know. And I think I'm doing them a disservice by comparing them to this fucking balding, homeless-looking bum that is currently the AEW interim champion. So let's look at this from a business standpoint. This Moxley is figured in for a guaranteed contract from a billionaire that has a national television wrestling promotion. For good or bad, he's got one, and it's there. And this guy is one of the main event names and is the interim world champion and is scheduled to, I would think, at some upcoming major event, unify that title with the real champion, CM Punk, the big star in the company, who's just come back to television, right? So that's going to take place. And it's not like that Moxley, since he's on this guaranteed contract with Tony Khan, needs to go out and slum to make a living. He doesn't have to go to these garbage shows that have these death matches and these off-brand, untrained mud show performers and these questionable fans with their things that they like on these shows, where video of things like this is going to get out to sane, normal people. He's not only representing AEW as a champion, but he's putting AEW's business in risk. Does he get hurt wrestling one of these untrained, do-it-yourself jack-offs in one of these garbage matches on these stupid programs? In that case, he can't be at the pay-per-view. He can't fucking perform his AEW functions because he's let some idiot puncture him some way with a goddamn baseball bat studded with dildos or whatever. Or, as in the case of what's happened here over the weekend, video footage of the completely ridiculous, totally tasteless, obviously phony and unsavory bullshit that goes on at these garbage shows in front of these garbage people that go to them and in front of the garbage people that promote them. The video gets out. Regular people see it. This is the guy that's on AEW. He's wrestling big major name stars on AEW, and he puts that rear naked choke on them and they go out. But now he's got a rear naked choke in what looks like a barn in front of 72 people on a fucking guy wearing trunks that looks like that he may have just washed up on shore from a swimming accident. That's the only way we really can tell he's a wrestler. He's wearing swim trunks. Maybe he fell off a fishing boat. I don't know. And while Moxley, the big-time national TV star, has got his finishing hold, the choke on this guy, the guy's got his hand in his pants playing with his penis. Yes, he's whistling at Old Willie. Yes, he's had the Four Sisters on Thumb Street wrapped around Mr. Johnson. On video, in the middle of the... He's not worried about the rear naked choke that's about to put him out. He's playing with his dick. And everybody knows how good using your dick for spots goes over in the wrestling business. It's always worked for everybody else. But that's not enough. Then there's another scene where they are throwing punches at each other. And then this homeless bum, what'd you say his name is? F.U.? Old F.U.
I believe it was Effie.
F.E., F.U., F me, whatever the case. He starts throwing punches at Moxley, and Moxley's leaning over, sticking his chin out, and the guy is acting like he's punching him, but it's really, there's so much daylight, you can tell he's not. Of course, Moxley wasn't selling it anyway. And then there was the part where they decided to do the Japanese strong style trading of the blows in the middle of the ring, but instead of chops or punches or forearms, it was kisses. There are two grown men allegedly in a fight, standing in the ring, grabbing each other's face and kissing each other back and forth. And then apparently Moxley won that because he grabbed the guy and kissed him for a long time. And then when people, the clip went up on Twitter, and I said, well, it's good to see Plumber Moxley, you know, being a great representative of AEW and embarrassing his company like he embarrasses the wrestling business. And, you know, special props to the goddamn opponent for looking like a homeless person just wandered into the arena. And everybody go, oh, but you're so homophobic. What the fuck did that have to do with this phony, silly, stupid wrestling? Because I don't think Moxley's homosexual. He's married. I've never seen this other fucking river floater before in my life.
You have once, but only in picture form, so you wouldn't know it.
What picture did I see him in?
It was either a singles match or part of a bigger match. I really couldn't tell you. I don't keep up with this, but he was the wrestler trying to force Marco's stunt onto the dildo. It was his dildo.
This is the guy that brought forth the name Dwarf Dongsucker for Little Marco. Okay, well, so the guy that was trying to force the midget from Mississippi to suck a giant foot-long rubber cock at a garbage wrestling show last year or whenever is now the guy that's trading kisses with Jon Moxley in the ring. But everybody, oh, you're just uncomfortable with people that are happy or comfortable with their sexuality. No, I'm uncomfortable with bad fucking phony wrestling and bad phony wrestlers doing it in front of people, making the goddamn business look like a bunch of shit, which is what they did, which is Moxley's fucking MO. And he went to this garbage show so that he could get together and play with, and I guess I shouldn't say play with, since the wrestler that he was wrestling was tickling his own self when he was in Moxley's hold, but he wanted to play with the bank-addicted drug robber that's part of garbage championship wrestling also, and he's friend. Moxley's idol is a guy that was on drugs and robbed a fucking bank and does nothing but bring shame and disfavor on the professional wrestling industry everywhere he goes. So Moxley's working for a billionaire, got more guaranteed money than people 5 times as good as him in the wrestling business had ever even seen before. But for fun, he goes out and he fucking slices himself with razor blades on garbage shows in front of fucking a few hundred bizarre individuals who get into that kind of thing, and they let these fucking jack-offs with their dildos and their fucking diddling come in and play with themselves during their matches. And that's what Moxley really makes him happy. So is anybody wondering now why I think that Jon Moxley is the worst pushed wrestler in the world? And Tony Khan don't have the balls to tell him, hey, if you're going to be my champion and on my television, then let's not have video of you in the ring trading phony punches and real kisses with a guy that's jacking himself off while you're putting your finish on him. You fucking imbecile. Maybe they should have taken him. You know, normally these therapy places or the rehab places or whatever, if you're under 18, they still got to put you through school or something, right? Could there have been somebody that could have, when he was in therapy for whatever else his issues were, could have put Moxley in school and teach him some reading, writing, arithmetic, and other shit that normal, sane adult people know that apparently he's unaware of? But anyway, so that was my comment on that footage. And people are seeing through these guys now. Because there was a ton of people on Twitter, what the flying fuck is this? Why is this happening? Why are these people doing this on purpose? Why are they not ashamed? What has Tony Khan got to say about this? They're all saying that. But these guys, as I mentioned before with other people, are so drunk on the smell of their own farts that they can't figure out when they're doing obviously stupid shit in public that reflects negatively on the company they work for and their business in general. And they think it's cute and funny. So I'm glad I've never met this fucking guy. Because here's another one that I can add to the list. I don't know that there can be a person farther opposite to me on the face of this planet than me and Jon Moxley, and that's the way I want to keep it. Fuck this guy.
I didn't see that. People were saying that you were homophobic about criticizing this thing here?
Yes, and a bunch of other the people who were criticizing this on Twitter, other people were saying, "Oh, you're just homophobic," and they're like, "Dude, what the fuck? What does gayness or homosexuality have to do with guys doing fake, stupid wrestling in the middle of a ring in front of no people in a goddamn cinder block building, just jacking themselves off, literally in the ring?"
Yeah, if I was a gay man and I said I'm not interested in seeing wrestling where guys are jerking themselves off and then kissing each other, is that homophobic? Or is it only if you're straight and you make that complaint?
Well, I think that means that you actually like wrestling or don't like stupid shit. And the phony punches was as as bad to me as the goddamn trading the kisses. Although, again, it's context.
To me, the jerking off was the thing that just made this an all-time embarrassing thing. Something Tony Khan couldn't help but be embarrassed by this because of that.
Well, that was a standout thing, but I hate the fucking fake wrestling worse because, but all of Moxley's wrestling looks fake. He can't fucking do anything. But the other guy was a shits either.
He can't do the elbows. He can't do the punches. I mean, it's a steady thing with Moxley.
But again, what audience is this for? If you want to see homosexual erotica, then you don't want the fake punches in the middle of the kisses. Or if you want to see fighting, you don't want the kisses in the middle of the fake punches, which you don't want the fake punches either. Who are they trying to appeal to here?
I don't know what the key audience is for them. It's certainly not me.
And that's these little asswipes fucking way out every time that they don't want people to tell the truth about them. When these fucking outlaw mud show jack-off wrestlers, literally jack-off wrestlers, well, you're just homophobic if you don't like me because I'm gay. No, I don't like you because you're a shitty fucking wrestler and you're a clown and your shit looks fake and you're an embarrassment. Now go fuck anybody. You want to blow a goat. I don't care. But
well, no, that's illegal. Don't do that.
Homophobic because is that not in every state?
Really? That's
I
awful.
don't think so.
That's terrible.
I think Alabama just put up a fucking bestiality law a year or two ago. So they're cracking down on things finally down there. But nevertheless, it's not homophobic to criticize a fucking shitty gay wrestler, just like it's not racist to criticize a shitty Japanese wrestler. It's criticism, and it's observably true. So fuck all y'all.
All right, well, I'm going to guess that maybe there'll be some letters, some complaints sent to someone. I have no idea who. There's no commission. There's nothing. It's the Wild West out there. But you did mention something to me earlier I wanted to bring up about a complaint letter you
well, I got a couple of things here. This is actually, we all got copies of this, but I got a copy. Remember I said they appointed me as Sonny's official liaison with the talent relations department, right? Because I was the only one that she wouldn't drive crazy, and I was the only one that didn't mind talking to her because everybody else had lost their patience. And I've in the past, I've not wanted to embarrass Tammy unnecessarily, but she's done a pretty good enough job of that on her own recently, so why not bring this up too? But basically, when they determined that Sonny, as we've talked about in the USA Network poll, Sonny was the only girl they had, the only female talent they had that Sable didn't get, because Sable, the two Vinces were in love with Sable. And because of that, she got a big push and she got a lot of prominent spots and she got the Playboy thing because Sonny turned it down. I was there at that time, believe it or not, folks. Sonny said, I'm not taking my clothes off in Playboy. So Sable got the fucking deal. And she didn't care because she'd found surgeons all over the country to prepare her for that moment. But everybody latched, the fans, Sonny was the most downloaded celebrity on AOL because she had the personality. You could tell she wasn't just a plastic bitch. She had personality, good, bad, or indifferent. If you wanted a good girl, you wanted a bad girl, whatever the fuck, she had it.
Plus, she had the hotter photos. You have to say
and that. And she had the pic,
those photos of her on the beach, those are hotter than any of those Sable photos at that time.
But then they figured out that, well, now we've got a problem because she started out as a heel valet with the Body Donnas. And, of course, that killed them, not only the gimmick, but also her being there because everybody was paying attention to Sonny. And it was like with Sable, with Mero. It killed him because everybody was looking at her. Since nobody really had heat in the WWF at that time, they liked pretty girls. She looked the same exact way in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. I just dressed her a little differently, but because they knew who she was and her gimmick. She was a snooty fucking Wellesley College graduate that was a Hillary Clinton devotee and fucking pitching for, female equality and female rights and etc. And none of the fucking people in Tennessee wanted to hear that. So she was a bitch and a heel. And she had as much heat as I did, more heat than any heel in the company. And then she goes up there and she gets put in an underneath gimmick. But now she's a pretty girl dressed sexily with no reason to be mad at her. And they start cheering like crazy for her. Okay. But then what do they do with her? They couldn't figure out a way to make her a manager because she'd have to be a heel and the people are cheering for her. It would kill the heel. Well, there's no reason for a babyface girl to just come out and wander around. And obviously Sunny was not a wrestler, nor was Sable, and there weren't any female wrestlers on the roster at that point. So they make her the goodwill ambassador where she just comes out on TV every once in a while so the guys can ogle her. And they sent her on the road to do ticket on sale dates and appearances and stuff. And they were trying to figure out ways to use her without her actually being at ringside, which she hated because she wanted to work at ringside and she wanted to be a manager. And also, when she became the most downloaded female celebrity on AOL or whatever, that's when the ego started kicking in and she started getting the big head. So the decision was made to include me in the loop on everything related to Sunny from Talent Relations so that I could be the one to tell her what they wanted her to do because she wouldn't argue with me. But I also got copied on all the documents. Here's one from Todd Pettingill to Kevin Dunn. See, now remember, Todd Pettengill was Kevin Dunn's boy. And Todd did a morning radio show in New York on what was the station? You probably know.
WPLJ. It was him and Scott Shannon, and it was the lamest fucking show ever. I hate to say it, but
Scott Shannon actually was a big time. He was from Memphis.
That's
he did radio in Memphis and was a big wrestling fan. But
biggest fucking head you've ever seen. Just a giant fucking head. You got to see this guy.
Like a fucking bucket. But anyway, so Kevin Dunn had hired Todd Pettengill to do these things. And Todd had a deal where he barely ever had to even go to a show. Every once in a while he came to the studio. He could do voiceovers from his house on this line they had put in. And he was making 6 figures a year because he's Kevin Dunn's boy, and Kevin Dunn liked real broadcast people that weren't in wrestling. So Todd doesn't send this to Jim Ross, head of talent relations. He sends it to Kevin Dunn so he can send it over. Kevin, I just wanted to inform you of a few situations as they pertain to Sunny and myself. I was asked by Vince through you if I would mind giving Sunny a ride every Saturday to Shotgun because they both lived in New Jersey. Right? I was unwilling to help out in that situation, and this is why. I don't trust her and do not want to be alone with her. And by the way, Todd Pettingill was a fucking pussy.
Oh, come on.
He was a pussy whipped pussy. He was scared like crazy of this. It's the same thing when they had Jenna Jameson. They did the shoot with Jenna Jameson and Val Venus in Bruce Pritchard's house, and Bruce's wife got mad that she was naked in the hot tub. In their hot tub. I'm like, fuck! Bring her over to my house.
Bronze the hot tub.
There you go. Autograph it at least. Anyway, Todd continues, I was unwilling to help out in that situation, and this is why. I don't trust her and do not want to be alone with her. I feel she thinks her star is rising, and there isn't anyone she won't make up a story about in order to get where she wants to be. I feel I have always been a team player and wanted to express my reasons for saying no to this request. Sunny tends to be overly flirtatious, and it makes me extremely uncomfortable. At that point in time, Sunny was not sucking up to Todd Pettengill. She wanted to fucking ride to Shotgun from New Jersey. But she was flirtatious with everybody, and he was a nervous Nelly. But this is what the greatest part was. Secondly, I wanted to express what I thought was inappropriate behavior on her part. When I did a shoot for Shotgun at my residence in New Jersey in January where I played the part of Elmo, remember the Fondle Me Elmo? This was another
I did not realize that was him for some reason.
This was another fucking thing that Vince came up with. And Tickle Me Elmo was the hot Christmas toy that year, right?
That's right. Well, yeah, sold that everywhere.
They got this big Elmo costume, and Todd Pettengill had to get in the Fondle Me Elmo. It was Fondle Me Elmo, get in the Elmo costume, and Sonny did some kind of business. They shot at his house. There was a film crew there. And I remember her calling, going, what the fuck is... Anyway, Vince called us on his way to my residence to explain what he wanted from us, and Sonny went ballistic. After Vince hung up, of course, she was ranting and raving about how she was going to, quote unquote, bury you. And he's talking to Kevin Dunn now, and she hated Kevin Dunn too. Well, I mean, like the entire population of the fucking Eastern Seaboard, but she was going to find a way to make sure you suffered, in quotation marks. There were several people around during the shoot, but she said these things directly to me. She then locked herself in my bathroom with her boyfriend, and they commiserated for 15 minutes before reappearing. That obviously was Candido. I just wanted you to be officially aware of these situations. Thank you for your time. Fucking. And I mean, it's great because there was an element of that. Yes, Tammy was going crazy at that point, and also she was flirtatious, but like Pettingill, fuck, he wasn't high enough on the totem pole nor attractive enough.
But again, top-rated radio show in New York City. He had a spectacular mullet for the time. He had a very, very colorful outfit usually. You don't know.
You should have seen the first time I named him Todd Petting or called him Todd Pettingzoo. But anyway, here's another one. This is a letter. Well, this is it's multiple things. I'm not going to read all of Tammy's response, but you remember Tim Knoll down in Richmond, Virginia, right?
Of course. He was friends with Dave Lane.
Yeah, longtime fan. Well, he apparently had posted on AOL.com back when they did these things, you know, well, it was a message board or whatever they called them back then.
Yeah.
And it's the wrestling news. Sonny was here in Richmond today doing radio and public appearances. On our local sports radio show, she went off on Sable after host Big Al Coleman asked about his female guest from WWF back in May when they were here for In Your House. Sonny said something. This is in November 1997. Sonny said something to the effect of, she's got no charisma, can't talk or manage, is Miss Anti-Personality, and no one in WWF likes her. Al then commented that she never removed her sunglasses during the appearance, and Sonny said, that's so you can't look in her eyes and see what an empty head she's got. She went on to say that Sable only had a job due to saline.
Wow.
She ran down the card for Richmond on November 21st and told everyone to go get popcorn during Mark Merrow's match.
Wow.
She did also talk about how she at one time wanted to be a pediatrician, how she broke her hand in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and about being scarred due to an errant chair shot from Kevin Sullivan. She also said, and I really like this, that she really misses managing at ringside and gets tired of these promo tours.
Well, there you go.
So, and that's what it was, because, you know. So then here's the letter, November 17, 1997, from Jim Ross to Tammy. Dear Tammy, the enclosed AOL posting was faxed to me Sunday, November 16, 1997. I spoke with our market rep who verified this information, your comments about Sable to be accurate to the best of his knowledge. After our discussion in Cornwall at TV on November 11th, so the week before this happened, he had just had a talk with her in Ontario at a TV taping about, Tammy, you got to calm down with the Sable and the Goodwill Ambassador role and the blah, blah, blah. He says, after our discussion, I thought you understood what the company expects of you in this Goodwill Ambassador role and that I specifically instructed you not to communicate your personal feelings regarding Sable to the media or the public. I'm very disappointed this occurred. After our discussion, we'll be in touch with you soon further to discuss this matter and your future in the WWF, which wasn't very long after that. She wrote him a 3-page letter. I'm not going to read all of this, but I mean,
come on.
Well, JR, first and foremost, I would like to say I understand your concerns about my personal feelings and comments toward Rena Marrow. Per our discussion, I hope you understand the reasonings behind my feelings. The direction of my comments is not based on jealousy or envy, rather on dedication and true concern for the welfare of this business that we are all lucky enough to be involved in and make a living from. Because basically she said, what the fuck? She's the shits. But now here she buries me. You know, my knowledge and growth in this business came from none other than Jim Cornette and the way wrestling used to be and the way you like it. Therefore, I do believe Mrs. Marrow is not exactly the image a woman should be portrayed or utilized. I also believe that I put my heart and soul in everything I do, whereas I know from personal comments of hers that she's in it for the stardom alone. I do have a great problem with that, and that is why I find myself speaking of her in a demeaning way. And that was true. Sabe actually came out and said, I'm doing this to be on TV. But she says, on the other hand, I've learned to understand the World Wrestling Federation does not adhere to the values of the old school of wrestling, and I feel I've come a long way in adjusting to these new sports entertainment ethics. Skipping ahead a little bit. In saying that, I must now admit that I've been wrong in expressing how I feel about her in public, and for that I apologize. I will from now on swallow my pride and even go to the extent of putting her over on interviews to continue in my role as what you call a goodwill ambassador. Now on to the subject of the Richmond radio interview. The extremely exaggerated review by Mr. Tim Knoll. Because and she's telling me every time an interview begins, the first thing they ask is, what will you be doing there? Sadly, I have nothing earth-shattering to say. The second thing they ask is, who's your rival in the WWF? I always say, I don't have a rival. I'm in a class of my own. And then this particular DJ persisted in stirring up the fact that I've said things about Rena in the past. And apparently she was pressed to say these things. And the AOL statement was all a 1-hour promo condensed into one paragraph. And you must take, this is great. Talking about what she said about Sable, you must take into consideration that I specifically avoided comments about the wrinkles, the Shar-Pei puppy skin, etc. Because that's, oh, God damn it, Sable went ballistic when she said she's got more wrinkles than a Shar-Pei puppy. The saline was also a shot at myself. I admitted I've had implants. But when asked what the difference was between us, instead of saying how I truly feel, I stated that she had more saline than me. Now, I'm being treated unfairly. And then also in the past 3 years, there have been many occurrences where I've been personally and verbally attacked by Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Shawn Michaels, to name a few, not just on some local radio interview, but on national television. These have gone unnoticed and unaddressed, and I bitched for months to get it resolved. This is called a double standard.
She's not wrong.
When Shawn blatantly inferred in a live interview that I was having an affair with Bret Hart, everyone was worried about what Bret's family thought. Not one word was mentioned to me about how it affected mine. True. If you did not know, this can be construed as a form of slander and sexual harassment. And also, where did she get to the point of the, hold on, there's some...
She's right about that.
Yeah, well, she is.
Yeah.
Being the youngest person in this company and female, it's extremely difficult to make every person happy. It seems that to me that the boys making sexual connotations at my expense is a lot more serious than me stating that someone is only good for standing in the corner of her man. And then she brings up, I understand you were not in the office position you were in now when other horrible things occurred to me. I forgot to mention the 3.5 weeks of hell I spent in Germany, the verbal abuse, the feces in my food. I'm sure you heard all about it. And blah, 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 and 3 paragraphs of closing nicely.
Forget about the way everything happened since. And, we currently know what situation she's in. But if you go back in time and look at that, is she right about the fact that there's a double standard? I mean, we all heard the stories, and here she is in the letter saying that these things happen with the feces and the food and everything and this horrible European tour. Is she right? I mean, they're ready to send her a note and send her home, and everyone else got away with it.
Yes. Well, because here's the thing. Once she starts being herself, a lot of the guys, this bitch, we'll fuck with her. Well, but the problem is she was the only girl. It wasn't like it is now where there's girls and guys. So she had no backup amongst, on her side, because all the guys thought she was a bitch. So they're shitting in the lunchbox, or they're doing whatever the fuck and saying whatever the fuck. And did she have a part to play in it by being, the getting the attitude she had? Yes. In Smoky Mountain, she had a regular bitchy attitude that was fine and dandy because it was 16 guys. Everybody knew each other. You were in the same locker room with the same 8 people every night. And it was a territory. It was like a special gifted kids class where everybody gets personal attention. But now you're in a locker room with 50 or 60 wrestlers, and they're going all over the fucking world, and it's a goddamn big business. And it's not cute there when one of the talents, even if they are talent, needs special attention. And the guys team up and fucking make sure to persecute that person to make them miserable, because that's fun on the road. And so then she'd have to call the office and blah, blah, blah. They didn't do it to Sable because, as I've mentioned so many times, Sable was an undercover cunt. She sat in the room. She spoke to Mark Marrow. She was polite to everybody, but she didn't mix in anybody's business, and she didn't do whatever. Tammy had a personality, and she was going to fucking talk to everybody. And that meant she was going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. And she had the same thing going on I had with Shitstain. She's over there going, wait a minute. I can manage. I can promo. I'm the most downloaded celebrity on the internet. I have a fairly good working knowledge of the wrestling business, both in terms of psychology and its history. And then here's this fucking plastic, surgically enhanced woman 10 years older than me with no personality, can't promo, can't work, can't fucking manage, and knows jack all of shit about the wrestling business. And they're giving her all this attention instead of me because Vince and Vince are in love with her. And there it became. It was the same thing with me and Shitstain. I'm over here with goddamn experience, knowledge, and talent. And he's over there with his buggy whip arms and his beady eyes and his fucking bro. What the fuck? So you naturally, people like that, grate upon each other. But that was her thing. She wanted to manage. She wanted to be in the wrestling business. She was doing neither. She was getting a big head. She was rubbing people the wrong way. There was, especially when they went overseas back in those days, Jim Ross wasn't even in the position at that point in time, but they were, that's why a lot of goofy shit happened overseas, because they had less supervision. But then Tammy didn't do herself any favors after this. And after they gave me to her or her to me so that I could try to avoid her getting heat with the rest of the office, I approved all of her expenses on the road and all that shit. And I'd have to call her up and say, Tammy, I know Chris was in the room with you, and there's no way you ate a 14 fucking egg white omelet. So we're not paying $80-something in 1997 for your breakfast at the Marriott. Keep it reasonable and I'll fucking push it through, but make it look at least good. Work with me. Shit like that. But then, and that's just at that point, then she got too big for her britches, and I couldn't, do much about that in covering up for all the heat she was getting on herself.
Yeah, no one ever looks at that Bret Hart promo from the Sunny perspective. When Shawn Michaels says that Bret's having sunny days, everyone always thinks about Bret. Everyone always thinks about Bret's wife, hearing that. No one ever thinks about Sunny, who...
And especially since it wasn't happening, it was happening from the fucking guy that was running his mouth.
Right. She wasn't fucking Bret Hart. She was fucking Todd Pettengill.
All right, now, come on.
PLJ.
But anyway, nobody ever says that.
No.
Nobody ever said that, but nobody ever said what was it like the other way. All right.
All right. Well, hey, Jim, perhaps... one is a Todd Pettengill, and one doesn't appreciate whatever it may have been in the car, whatever car it may have been, a hand on the lap, a hand on the hand.
She actually, Sonny, at one time, she trained to be a magician. They were driving down the road. She touched Todd's leg. He turned into a motel.
Or perhaps he never came back out of that motel and his wife wants to sue.
Well, in that case, I know exactly who Mrs. Pettingill should call. The man, the myth, the legend, the king of West Virginia himself.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. Those are the rest.
Folks, I've got some big news here about the state of West Virginia and Stephen P. News' influence upon it. Do you realize, Brian, you've heard about this, but the folks have not, that the West Virginia governor, Governor Jim Justice, who apparently was Sid's second cousin, Sid Justice.
What about Ben Justice?
Ben Justice, and he was partners with the Stomper. I think Ben Justice was Governor Jim Justice's father. Anyway, the governor of West Virginia, whose name is really Jim Justice, what a gimmick, has issued a state of emergency in the state of West Virginia because he just heard the bad news that Stephen P. New is now representing people on behalf, or against rather, the state of West Virginia. They have declared a state of emergency because West Virginia heard that Stephen P. New was coming for him. Did you hear about this? You've heard about this.
I've heard all about this, yeah.
Folks, I'm telling you, if I'm lying, I'm flying, and my feet have not left the ground. The governor has declared a state of emergency for all the jails in the state of West Virginia because a letter has been sent to the state indicating that Stephen P. New and his educated and illustrious minions will be suing on behalf of over 300 inmates who are living now in not only overcrowded but deplorable conditions in jail. And I got to tell you, that's a joke that writes itself. If you can find more deplorable conditions than the normal ones in West Virginia, they would only be in a fucking jail in West Virginia. Contaminated food, lack of plumbing and water, inadequate medical care, rampant gang attacks, and that's just at the local Tudor's Biscuit World. When you get into the jails, it's even worse. And there is a federal lawsuit that is about to get filed on behalf of those inmates who are being fed slop and hooey, who are not being given access to running water, who they don't have enough guards to staff these jails. It's overcrowding and understaffing. There's a big problem about it. It's been covered in all the newspapers and quite a few of the radio stations in West Virginia, all three of them, as a matter of fact. And no, I'm just kidding about the fine folks in West Virginia. But apparently, they pay the correctional officers in West Virginia like caca compared to the surrounding states. And the staffing shortage and mandatory overtime has led to issues like burnout from the staffing, but apparently it's also led to issues like starving the inmates and depriving them of their toilet time and things like that. So that's something else, another segment of the downtrodden. You can drown in one of those hot toddies. The downtrodden that Stephen P. New takes care of. It doesn't just have to be the rich, successful folks. It's really, you measure a man, Brian, you've heard this before, by how they take care of and interact with the least of those in our society. And it's the least that he can do, Stephen P. New, to try to help these poor people have some food and water and occasionally a place to poop that is sanitary and up to standards. That's just one of the many things.
Many.
That New Law, many.
One of the many, just one.
One of the great many. Newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. Have you been wrongly terminated? Have you been damaged or injured by negligence on the part of someone else? Have you been locked up in jail and you weren't given your proper food and plumbing and access to I don't know, recreation and all the things that whatever the case, if somebody's pissed you off and done you wrong, call Stephen P. New. He'll be a part of it. And we've mentioned over the last several weeks, he is spreading out to all kinds of states. I don't even have the list of states here in front of me, but Louisiana is on that list, and Ohio, and Tennessee, and a great variety of others. The Stephen P. New and newlawoffice.com branching out worldwide, countrywide. If you got rotten food for your last dinner in jail, then call Stephen P. New, or any other reason. He'll find some way or another to get you paid. Stephen P. New, newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. And Governor Justice, the gavel of justice, is coming down upon you.
Well, Jim, before we wrap things up, let's get a few questions in, because we promised some, and then we had such a good time, and it was incredible. You going through your files. We got to do that more often. But
well, hopefully, do the people like it out there? Let us know if you like this kind of deep dive into prehistoric business, and we'll do more of it, because I got a bunch more files to go through.
Well, something happening right now that may be in a file for the future. Several people have sent this in. I'm trying to see exactly where this disseminated from originally. This is from the AEW Elite Member Fan Club.
Oh, that gimmick that Shitstain started for Eric Watts, Shawn Michaels.
No, not that elite. Not that elite.
That elite? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, these other elites, they weren't hardly even born then.
You know what? We just did that, and I almost forgot the callback at first. Like, what is he talking about? Oh, shit. But this was sent out.
I wonder who's going to be the first one to tell them that they've named their group after a fucking idea that Vince Russo came up with.
Who's going to be the first one to call Eric Watts to try to get him to come in and make an appearance on TV?
Who's going to be the one to tell Eric Watts, you almost made it, kid?
Watch Triple H go and trademark the Elite. But anyway... Right. This was sent out to that privileged group that I just mentioned before. This is for Charleston, West Virginia, tomorrow night, AEW Dynamite. Instructions for AEW seat filler. Wednesday, August 17th, 2022 at 6 p.m.
They're doing it now?
Thank you for volunteering to be an AEW seat filler tomorrow evening here in the Charleston Coliseum. All seat fillers must be willing to stay for the entirety of the AEW event from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. Tickets will be given to you tomorrow upon arrival at 6 p.m. If you know of anyone who might be interested, we are still in need of approximately 10 more seat fillers.
What?
Please send their contact information my way, and I can reach out to them. Please meet at 6 p.m. and no later than 6:15 p.m. That's in red. In the Convention Center lobby, the address, and it has the address here. Once we have everyone at 6:15 p.m., we will proceed to a seat filler meeting room where you will be instructed by AEW on your role for the evening.
Jesus Christ, if somebody gets up, have they not seen the Seinfeld where Kramer was a seat filler? If somebody gets up, go sit in the fucking seat. If somebody comes back, don't get up. Don't let them have it. It's yours now.
I understand this is how AEW has found a lot of their talent, is through the seat filler program. But all tickets will be given to you at that time. Again, thank you. And we look forward to meeting you tomorrow evening and having fun. Thanks.
Remember when people just understood that they're watching a television show that's being taped in a sports arena, and people from time to time get up to go take a piss and get a drink and some popcorn, and then they come back and sit back down? So if you see a seat or two empty, that's what's happening. And now it's got to be done like the Oscars.
Well, there are certain matches that the seats empty out a little more than other matches.
Well, yes, and maybe you shouldn't book so many of those matches on your TV show. But I'll tell you one thing, Charleston, West Virginia at the Civic Center, you take the wrong motherfucker's seat and you're not getting up when he comes back with a smile on your face, there's going to be a better fight in the crowd than there will be in the ring. Just so they're aware.
The other thing is, even if you're a hardcore wrestling fan and you're like, oh man, a free ticket, you have to be there from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m.
Well, but also here's the thing. What are you doing when you're not sitting in somebody else's seat? Are you standing over in the corner with your dick in your hand? Do they have some place that you can watch what you're missing? Or are you just seeing the match that you're sitting in the seat for?
You're so old-fashioned. The guys with their dicks in the hand are in the ring.
Oh, I forgot. They're wrestling Moxley. And, here's another. I got to go back to this for a second. If somebody had pitched that spot, if whatever the fuck reason that they would pitch that spot to somebody in the old days, the first thing that is said was, I don't care whether you play with your dick or not, but not while I'm choking you out with my finish. If I'm putting my finish on you, you are not going to have the goddamn wherewithal or presence of mind to know where your cock is, much less be able to grab it on the first try. Because it's my finish and it's going to fuck you up. So that right there, I don't, but anyway, yeah.
But seat fillers.
Fill your hand instead of your seat.
All right. Well, Jim, with that advice, let's get another question here. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com. If this is indeed his real name, from Sean in San Antonio, Texas.
Well, it sounds reasonable to me.
Hello, Jim and Brian. I've been a listener of your show for well over a year now. My question is for Jim. I know when AEW or WWE book a no DQ match or something in the like, you'll say, lazy booking. Now, I know what this means, but for your new listeners, they may not know. And as the cult of Cornette continues to grow, could you explain what lazy booking means?
Oh, good Lord. As briefly and succinctly as possible, obviously, there is a place for a no disqualification match in wrestling or a stipulation match where the rules are relaxed or even eliminated. Anything goes. One man must be a winner. Right? That's a blow-off match or a match very late in a program, a rivalry. I forgot I used the word program. A feud or rivalry, it's a program. It's a program between two entities. A series of matches is a program. You don't start out with putting them in a cage or a fucking Texas death match or a goddamn street fight, because where do you go from there? If you start out with a street fight and you end up with a one-fall match with a time limit, are you going in the right direction? No, it's opposite. It's backwards. So there are obviously places and reasons to have all those wild stipulations, generally when it'll sell a ticket or draw a rating or draw pay-per-view buy or whatever the case. But when you do them constantly, incessantly, over and over, in places where they're not even apropos or called for, and you do them with everybody, then not only does it trivialize and minimalize the impact of each of those stipulation matches, and it lessens the impact that they have when anybody does them, top talent, mid-card talent, or whatever, but it's also just a sign that you're so lazy and uncreative with your booking that you can't figure out a way to start guys off in a program and get them to the point where it might be called for to have a no disqualification, Texas death, chain, strap, brass knucks, whatever the case match. You just do it right at the start because you can't think of any other better way to start this story. Can't think of any other better way to hook people than to have them watching somebody bashing each other over the head with blunt instruments from the start of the thing. Even a action adventure movie starts out with the hero in his backyard in fucking swim trunks, sunbathing, and meanwhile over across the world, the antagonist or the heel is or the guy that he's going to be fighting is somewhere getting into some mischief. And then later on, the fireworks happen when they come together. But so lazy bookies, because that's what the chaos fan wants. That's what the mark wants out of wrestling, is just nonstop chaotic activity, violence, blood, and bullshit. Like is talked about in the USA Network survey from 25 years ago, some things never change. People who have a passing knowledge of something and don't really follow it closely just like to see mayhem. So you give them mayhem. You're lazy. You don't give them any reason to be hooked into the individuals or the reason why that they're mad at each other. You're just going straight to the car wreck. That's lazy booking. Did I articulate that some of the new listeners might be able to pick up on it, Brian?
I think so. I think you answered the question very well. So let's get a few more here. Jim, this next one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from John in Londonderry, New Hampshire. In Bret Hart's book, he recounted the story of testing out his idea for the finish of an upcoming match with Yokozuna on a woman he had just slept with. This being Bret, I cannot remember if the woman was his wife or someone else. Any other stories of guys testing their stuff on their partners outside the ring?
Well, I don't remember that one, but to be honest, I did try to read and read most of Bret's book. It was encyclopedic in size and scope. It was a thick one with a lot of pages. I don't remember that specific passage, to be honest with you. How do I answer this? Yeah, I've heard of a lot of guys trying out a lot of different holds on their intimate partners, but not with the idea of using it for a finish in a wrestling match. I don't know, and I may chalk that one down to, I do remember from Bret's book that he did go into extra flowery prose when the romantic scenes came up. So I don't know, maybe he was extrapolating there, but I don't, did he say for a match with Yokozuna?
For a match with Yokozuna, the finish.
God damn, was he with one or both of the Rossetti sisters at the same time?
If it was for the finish, you got to think maybe it was Bret getting out of the Banzai drop. So maybe the woman was above him.
I'm not sure what woman he would have been with that would have been a good stand-in under any circumstances for Yokozuna. So I'm going to have to leave that one alone. I'll tell you, the Rossetti sisters, of course, were longtime Northeast fans. Rossetti sisters that Bobby Heenan made famous on Primetime Wrestling. But there was two sisters in Chattanooga years ago that went to the matches that Nick put on and were just the nicest, sweetest people that you could ever imagine. And I can't remember their first names, but Bobby Eaton called them the Igor sisters. And, and Bobby doesn't have a mean-spirited bone in his body, he didn't, but they laughed about it because they knew that the boys had nicknamed them the Igor sisters because both these girls, they were...
No, there was three of them.
There were? You knew them?
Yeah, I knew the Rosattis. There were three Rosattis.
No, I'm talking about the Igor sisters.
Oh, no. I think the Rosattis.
No, the Igor sisters in Chattanooga. They were about 5'10" and probably about 275 pounds apiece. And they both facially resembled, I don't know if you remember this cartoon from the 60s, but Milton the Monster. And the boys named them the Igor sisters, and they were just the nicest, sweetest people, and they were at all the matches. And I just can't help but thinking that Bobby Heenan could have made if they'd have come along. The last time I saw him was when we were down in Tennessee for, I think it was 96 for a pay-per-view. And that's the last time I saw him, but they've been around for 30 years at that point. Bobby Heenan could have made them TV stars, the Igor sisters from Chattanooga.
All right, I'm not sure if that answered.
What were we talking about?
Yeah, I don't know what we just answered. We're talking about Bret Hart testing his finish for the match with Yokozuna on a woman who may or may not have been his wife.
Or may not have been as big as Yokozuna.
We will never know.
That's what made me think of the Igor sisters. They weren't as big as Yokozuna individually, but together they occupied about the same amount of area.
Jim, this next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from John M. in Cincinnati. I have to imagine this was answered at some point in time, so apologies for the redundancy. However, I've been rewatching the beginnings of the Attitude Era, and I'm watching the burial of Jim Neidhart right before his departure. I'm wondering if Jim could speak on whether Jim Neidhart, I guess it would be there, if Jim could speak on whether Jim Neidhart asked to leave or was asked to leave, as well as what the climate was surrounding this particular angle with him joining DX after they had been so cruel to the Harts and himself, both on screen and in kayfabe.
God, I can't even remember that specific incident, but what with Jim Neidhart was a great guy, and he was a tremendous athlete. The reason they called him the Anvil is he had placed fairly highly or won, I can't remember which, an anvil throwing competition back before he got into wrestling. And he had played some football, and I met him in Mid-South when we went down there. He was working for Bill Watts, and he and Butch Reed had been a team. Of course, they split them up, and then Neidhart went to Memphis from there. But that's where we got to know him, and he was a heck of a guy and fun in the locker room. And like I said, he was a good talent and had gotten to be a good worker, and especially when that was 84. I met him by 86. He teamed up with Bret, and because Jim was a son-in-law of the Hart family. Obviously, Natty is his daughter. And so anyway, he and Bret were a great tag team. And the problem was, like a lot of other guys, over a period of the 90s, Jim had gotten older. He had gotten a little bigger. He always had the big belly, but he was an athletic beast. And he had gotten extracurricular activities, things outside the ring that hampered his performance. And that period in, 95, 6, 7, thereabouts, where they brought him back. And remember, at one point, they put a mask on him and made him Who?
Who? That was in 95, I think. No, 96.
96. Because that Who was along with the Goon and T.L. Hopper and all that shit. And again, not my fault. People say, well, you were involved in all that. I booked some of the talent, but I didn't give them any of the gimmicks, even though I was on the creative team. That was Vince commandeering it and Bruce following along. I was asking why couldn't everybody just use their own name. But with Neidhart, it was a different issue than with the other guys because they knew he was not in a good place, and they had given him a job because he needed one as a favor to the rest of the Hart family. But they tried to use him as himself at one point. It didn't work, and then they put the hood on him, and Who is that? That's Who, right. It's some play on words that Vince wanted to Abbott and Costello routine. That didn't work. Then it was several stops and starts. He had some injuries at that point, and I think he had potentially some other substance issue. I know he had them in his life. I'm not trying to out anybody for anything that they didn't know. It was covered and documented, but just the time frame, I think it was not a good time for Jim. And I think then later on he went to WCW when Bret went down there, did he not?
He did.
Briefly, and it didn't work out either. He was having personal issues that was not beneficial to his career. But so I can't say anything bad about Jim, but he was not, at that particular point in time, he was not the performer that he once was, and he had other things going on. So that's why all that craziness was happening. They would every once in a while, the office would try to give somebody that had obviously had the credentials in the past and that was connected to or meant something to some of the current talent. They'd try to help them out, but it didn't work out in a lot of cases. Terry Gordy was another one. Everybody. I mean, Vince had never known Terry Gordy, but Jim Ross had, and I had, and Bruce Pritchard had, and everybody was pulling for Terry. And what was that, 96, 97, right after he'd worked for me in Smoky Mountain, everybody was pulling for him to make it all the way back. And so they went and, I think Jim Ross was pretty instrumental, but we got him a spot there. They called him the Executioner because, again, they didn't want to advertise Terry Gordy and people think the Terry Gordy in their mind was going to be what they saw. It was to give a guy who needed a job rather than exploit the name of Terry Gordy. So the Executioner, and it was brief, and Terry was just not able to come back mentally, so that didn't work either. But there were a few times there where the evil empire actually tried to do good things for people, and they generally never worked out. That's probably why Vince quit doing it, because it never worked out. But that's what that was about.
With Neidhart, out of all the tag teams that existed outside of your world during the years of the Midnight Express, to me, the one dream match would have been Hart Foundation versus Midnight Express, because that would have been, I think, the best one. And no other tag team you guys didn't face would be as intriguing as the Hart Foundation.
And plus, like I said, we knew Neidhart, and he had gotten along real good with the Midnight when we were there. And Bret, Bret didn't have a fucking clue who we were, but Neidhart would have probably told him. I told you that story, right, about Owen.
No, I don't know. I remember you telling me that
long.
Bobby was a Bret fan, that he made you watch the Bret Hennig match. I was just thinking.
Well, yes, that way. Hey, he was saying, "Oh man, you ought to see this Bret Hart and Curt Hennig. It's insane." But in 1986, the first time we met Bret, and he didn't really know, right? So we're all in San Francisco because the WWF was where'd they run? Arco Arena. And outside of town, and we were downtown at the old building in San Francisco or whatever, but Crockett and WWF was both there. And at the time, the wrestlers stayed at the same hotel, regardless of what company, at the airport in San Francisco. So me and Bobby and Dennis at that time, Dennis was still with us, we get there and we're, walking into the hotel from the parking lot, and we see Jimmy Hart. And Jimbo, hey, boom. And here comes Jimmy over. And there was somebody else there that we knew. I can't remember. We're talking, but we saw, it was Neidhart. Of course it was Neidhart. And there's Bret Hart over in the corner, and he wanders up and shakes our hand and wanders off. And I think, Dennis made the comment like, yeah, personality on that fucking guy. Jimmy's like, he's Canadian. But then I found out later on, from Owen, when I managed Owen, because Owen was there that night with him, I guess, or whatever. But the point is, Owen told me, he said, Bret didn't know who y'all were. I said, what do you mean? Bret never watched WCW or Crockett in those days. He never watched Crockett's show. He had been in Calgary, he'd been to Japan, and he'd been the WWF. And so when here came Jimmy and here came Neidhart to talk to us, were we fans? He didn't know who the fuck we were. And I'm not saying that to go, well, you should have known I'm a big star. I'm just saying you're in the fucking business. We'd never met Bret, but we knew who he was, right? So anyway, that's what Owen had told me. He said, he didn't know who you guys were, because I said to him afterwards, I said, that's the best tag team in wrestling. And fucking Bret said, no, that's me and Jim. And Owen said, no, it's them. And Bret got mad at him. But that was the first time we met Bret Hart. He didn't know who the fuck we were. So it would have been interesting, at that period of time, if we'd have come in, because it was like.
And Owen did. And Owen was the one when he broke in, was, doing things no one else had ever seen before.
Owen knew who everybody was. Owen watched everything. Bret was the older son. Bret had come up, son of the promoter. We watched Stampede. Now we're doing business with Vince, so we watch Vince, but we don't watch the other stuff. That's why Bret never knew. Bret's book, the one thing I did take away from it was he, surprisingly, but then again, not surprisingly, like a lot of other sons of promoters that had only wrestled in one territory, he didn't know anything about anything that was going on in any of the other territories in the States or at any other place that he wasn't at. And he really didn't understand a lot about how the business worked to be the son of a promoter for, all that time.
How the business worked in the States, or how the business worked? What do you mean by
how
that?
The business worked, period? Because he'd never been a promoter and he'd never been a booker. He'd only been one of the boys, and he'd been the son of the promoter. And I'd have to have the book here, and maybe we'll do that sometime. Maybe I'll mark passages, but he didn't have a full understanding of who everybody else in the business was and how they interacted with each other and the different things that went on in different companies, because he'd never been there and never paid any attention. And sometimes you find that would happen with guys who grew up being in the family of the people who owned the territory. They didn't know what was going on outside their periphery because they were a fan of wrestling because they saw it and they watched their father do it and they went to the matches every Saturday night or whatever, but they weren't fans of the entire world of wrestling. That was their world. So they didn't know a lot of other things and the way things worked in different places. That's honestly why, Bret always talked about Flair doing the same match. Bret did the same match because that was his match with the stuff he stole from Dynamite. It's just who you steal from and where you break in. That determines what your match is like. So Bret was still in 1990-something doing the Calgary style, but since nobody else was doing it on a mainstream basis and nobody else was seeing it, it stood out as being particularly realistic and hard-hitting and no nonsense, blah, blah, blah. But everybody in Calgary worked like that, for good or bad, because they all stole it from Dynamite. Right? You know that because you've seen the footage.
Well, I'd hate to say Bret was just a Dynamite tribute actor.
Well, I'm not saying that, but I mean the style, the hard-hitting style, the style of the bumps, the style of the offense, the style
Dynamite brought that to, you could say Dynamite brought it to North America, actually, you could make an argument for, but he definitely brought it to Calgary. And again, Calgary top heels had been the Stomper, Abdullah the Butcher. Dynamite Kid changed that territory because he made smaller wrestlers having heavy, hard-hitting matches the style that worked.
And then everybody who was of an impressionable age at that point watching Calgary wrestling, including Bret, who was breaking in, started doing that. Just like, my God, everybody in fucking Atlanta, after Dusty got over, wanted to shuck and jive and, be the, space cowboy and Stardust, and everybody wanted to be Lawler in Memphis, and everybody wanted to be whoever the top guy was in whatever territory. But then what that led you to was in the territories, a lot of guys trying to do the same shit, and it kind of blended in. But when one of them went somewhere else and took a brand new style somewhere, they stood out.
Yeah, we were just watching, me and Mike Mills, Masao Ito, early 84. And whatever you want to say about him, one of the things that hurts him, again, a not very tall, somewhat stocky Japanese wrestler with long hair.
Yeah.
Kabuki was just there a couple of years before that. Yeah. Kendo Nagasaki was just there the year before that. So, I mean, it wasn't special.
Masayo Ito had no gimmick that was cool to Kabuki was a better worker than Masayo Ito, and Kabuki had a better gimmick. So they'd already seen a better example before he came along.
It does make me wonder if the people in Florida, not that I don't like Kabuki and Gary Hart and Gary Hart's promos about Kabuki, but the people in Florida didn't get Kabuki, they got Kendo Nagasaki.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the people who got the Rock and Roll Express first as opposed to the Fabulous ones. They got Kendo Nagasaki, not Kabuki. Kendo Nagasaki was really good. That's the biggest problem. If you saw Kabuki first, you couldn't really take him seriously.
Well, and the same thing with the Rock and Roll and the Fantastics as relates to Fabs and Rock and Roll. Whoever you saw first naturally registered as the better team because they were in the same genre, the MTV style music videos, the sexy guys for the girls, etc. They were different in that the Fabs, Stan and Steve, had the matches with the Sheepherders and the Moondogs and the fights, and they were the macho Harley Davidson riding fucking guys. They're still in the Speedos in questionable poses with today's eyes, but the girls loved it because they were macho guys. The Rock and Roll were the teeny bopper version. They were for the younger girls. They had the bandanas, and they got the shit kicked out of them more because they weren't big bodybuilders. They were fluffy young boys that your grandmother would love too.
Well, you know what, too? The Fabulous ones looked like the actors or models that would get hired to be in a music video. The Rock and Roll Express looked more like the band.
It looked like the band that would, exactly, because the rock stars didn't have Steve and Stan's bodies. And then the Fantastics kind of merged both of those things, whereas Bobby and Tommy were smaller than Stan and Steve, and they were cuter, and they were younger, and they didn't have the rough look to them. So they appealed more as teeny boppers like the Rock and Roll, even though it was a Fabulous one's, homage, the Fantastics. But the Fantastics got over in Dallas better than the Rock and Roll ever did because they were first. They were the first time that the people saw the tuxedos and the ZZ Top music and the strut and and then two baby faces that would sell their ass off and make a big comeback. So when the Rock and Roll went, they went in for shots. They never went to stay. But the reaction wasn't like, oh, my God, because those women were busy tearing Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers' clothes off on the way to the ring and pulling it. I watched Bobby Fulton try to get on the apron of the ring 5 different times one night, and the girls were pulling him down. And he had to grab the ropes, and Tommy had to give him a hand up to get away from the women. It was insane. But it was what you saw first. The same thing happened with the Fabs in Tennessee because they hadn't seen anything like it. When the rock and roll came along, they were just for the spot shows, the B team. But then the rock and roll show up in Louisiana where their baby faces before had been, Hacksaw Duggan and guys like that, great athletes, but not exactly teeny bopper idols. And the girls came in droves. So it depended on what you saw first and if they were any good at all. Then, of course, there were so many Rock and Roll Express ripoffs, the Rock and Roll RPMs and
Midnight Rockers are the most notorious.
The Midnight Rocker, well, at least they made it. Like poor Mike Davis and Tommy Lane, the Rock and Roll RPMs. I mean, Mike Davis was a good worker, but god damn, he looked the last thing like a rock and roll star with his snaggle teeth and, the physique. Well, I mean, seriously.
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
And then, I mean, even when Nick Bobby Eaton died laughing about this. Nick tried to run spot shows in the mid 80s in Tennessee. Nick Goulas did, Bobby's old boss. And he got Tommy Hagee, who was a local guy down there, and somebody else I can't remember, to be the Stop and Go Express. And I guess in his mind, it was like, well, they're quick and they're sudden, they stop and they go or whatever. But there was a Stop and Go convenience store chain. And Bobby Eaton used to fucking die laughing. Like, what are they going to come in and bring us some fucking hot dogs and everything? The Stop and Go Express? What the fuck's going on? So that was that.
All right. Well, Jim, before we get out of here, one last question. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Graham in Lebanon, Ohio. Apologies ahead of time for the long-winded question.
Uh-oh.
I was just wondering if Jim ever went to or ran any college towns. A city where most of the population was connected to the university, like a Clemson, South Carolina, or Oxford, Mississippi. If so, what were the gates like compared to a normal town? And did wrestlers work differently for what I presume would be a younger demographic?
Well, no, not back then. You never, you had your match that you had. If the house was big, you got better feedback. If it was small, it was like, maybe we'll get out of here a little quicker. But no, there was no reason to change the match because it was college kids versus just a regular crowd. And we did umpty million college towns, including, Boone, North Carolina, I remember, their Appalachian State. We went there, and that was the height of the first Midnight Rock and Roll angle, and every wise-ass college kid in that fucking building, which if there was 2,000 people there, probably 1,800 of them were from the college, brought tennis balls. And it was it was an open-air video game. They were throwing them from every place in that gym, and I had a tennis racket, right? So I'm just batting them back as they're coming at me. But they were coming too fast, and from behind us, one guy, Bobby, would be in the ring wrestling. Dennis would be on the apron with his back to the ring, keeping an eye out for flying objects. I'm fucking looking around, batting those things back at people, trying to take somebody's eye out. Every once in a while, the college crowds could get a little more rowdy just because they would have time to get together with each other and come up with shit they were going to do that was going to disturb the show. But no, there was no... They did not necessarily any better or worse than any other spot shows back then, except if the college was a sponsor and they were getting a piece of the gate to buy new football uniforms for the football team or whatever, they would sometimes draw better because they had a stake in getting more people in. They'd do better advertising. And I mentioned that Lexington, Kentucky, really the thing that put Jarrett over the top there was when the kids at the University of Kentucky found the wrestling program. He got Lexington was hard to get TV on in the 70s because there were only 3 stations. They were all network affiliates. They didn't have an independent station. And finally, through a contact that Lance Russell had, a program director at WLEX 18 in Lexington, had come from Memphis and knew the power of wrestling on TV and knew Lance Russell. And Lance got the TV on there in 1978. And for doing so, he got the opportunity to run some spot shows off Lexington TV. As well at what? What are you laughing about?
Is it a story that because he would show up at the Lexington shows, that he was there and one night, like Randy Savage and them started screaming at him in the parking lot?
Yes, that's with Savage and them when they started ICW, because Lance would come up from Memphis every month to be the ring announcer. Rupp Arena was special. And that was a 400-mile fucking drive for Lancer, but he was getting paid well because he'd gotten him the town. And where I was going with this was the first few shows were in Rupp Arena. They needed events at that time because they had built a 25,000 seat arena in Lexington, Kentucky, specifically because the University of Kentucky basketball team would fill it up every single game. It's basketball in Kentucky. But besides the Rolling Stones, they couldn't find anything else to book in Rupp Arena. Because here, Google the population of Lexington, Kentucky in 1980. This was 1978, but close enough. Every 10-year census. The point is, Jarrett was able to get dates at Rupp Arena because what they would do is they would put a curtain down the middle of the arena and then not open the upper deck. And that way you had an arena. 25% of Rupp Arena would seat about 6,000 or 7,000 people. And that was perfect for wrestling. And we've got Saturday at noon on the NBC affiliate. And there's only 3 stations in town. So they opened up the town, I think in May or June. And the first show did about 1,500 people. And the second show did about 1,300. And then the third show did about 2,500 people. Now people are starting to see the TV. But then we started seeing these pretty girls, young girls coming in, and then the young guys that were with them and or looking for them. And by the 4th or 5th month, they're up over 4,000 people. And it was the kids at University of Kentucky. The girls started seeing Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee. This was even before the Fabs and before the rock and roll. But they started seeing Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee. And then the guys started seeing Handsome Jimmy Valiant. Whoo, mercy! And then the kids from the college started coming like crazy. And you would see, whereas the other towns, the girls were attractive, all right, but they weren't fashion plates. But you'd see these girls coming in that were going to UK with the cashmere sweaters and the makeup done and the jewelry. And because everybody in Lexington, horse money, right? And it was insane. And then the guys started coming to see the girls. And by the time Lawler came back from his broken leg in 81 and they were starting to do real big crowds, I would say at least 50%, if not more, of the crowds that were doing 6,000, 7,000 people a month were kids from college age, from UK. And that made a big difference. And Jarrett, that Lexington, he only ran it once a month because that was just too big of a building. Louisville was weekly, Memphis was weekly, Nashville, Evansville, Indiana. And they did well. Memphis did phenomenally. But Lexington became the second biggest drawing city in the territory for those once-a-month shows because they would draw more than you could fit in the Louisville Gardens. And that was the second biggest building on the circuit. So Lexington was that's why Bockwinkel would be brought into Lexington, or Terry Funk would be brought in, or Superstar Graham, or whoever the outside stars were. Everybody went to Lexington. That was usually the big card of the month. Did you find anything about the population?
The population in 1980, 204,000. Yes.
Okay, a city of 204,000 people in 1980 was having 12 shows, drawing 5,000 or 6,000. Well, 1980 is a bad year because Lawler was out with the broken leg. In 1981, they ran 12 shows and did between 5,000 and 8,000 people. So let's say an average of 6. Town's 200,000 people. They were selling 75,000 tickets a year to 12 shows. Not bad.
Not bad at all. People could judge this show on their own, but with that, Jim?
I wonder if they're going to be saying the same thing about this one.
Well, with that, the drive-thru is closed. All right. Well, of course, you could hear the drive-thru return next week wherever you find your favorite podcast. And don't forget about the Jim Cornette Experience debuting this weekend wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com or available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Of course, access the archive at patreon.com/Cornette. For only $5 a month, you get access to the drive-thru and experience going back to 2013. Patreon.com/Cornette. Subscribe to the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette. It'll be the first thing that pops up. Full episodes, clips of episodes, omnibus collections, all with the exclusive Travis Heckel artwork, the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Of course, Cornette's collectibles at jimcornette.com, and are we calling it a figure Armageddon again, or what do we have a nickname
Action
for?
figure Armageddon. No, it's going to be nicer this time. We've got all our shit together. The feather bottoms are standing by. Saturday, September 17th at noon Eastern, they go on sale, the Santa Corny and the Monday Night Raw debut variant. You'll be able to see pictures at jimcornette.com starting September the 1st. And order in time for Christmas. Not in time for your Christmas, but in time for my Christmas, because it's still going to take me a while to sign all these. These are the only place you're going to get the autographed versions, and they're all hand done, so order early to avoid being left out.
And of course, if everyone buys up all the inventory this year, we're just one step closer to the Jim Cornette Mustang on a Fence playset at a later time. Right?
That's correct.
And of course, if you are someone whose fence has been hit by a Mustang, perhaps you want to sue. The drive-thru is brought to you by the law office of Stephen Pinu, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. But until this weekend on The Experience, and next week right back here on the drive-thru, for Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally-ho!